Chapter 362. Second Update. After midnight. When Li Tianlan carried Lin Yuxian, who was seriously injured and weak, into the Silver Lake Villa in Winter Mountain, the police station and garrison of Huiting had almost surrounded the entire Winter Mountain. Warning lights flashed all over the mountain, and a large number of troops occupied every passage up and down the mountain. The atmosphere was grim and dignified. Li Tianlan entered the villa, closed the door, and put Lin Yuxian on the sofa. Tianlan, is this the property of the Li family? Lin Yuxian leaned stiffly on the sofa, and his arms trembled unconsciously. It was crazy enough to fight against the god of war of Jianghu state with a strength close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, even if the god of war of Jianghu state was seriously injured and his strength was greatly reduced. The reason why the 22nd blade was called one of the 24 moves of sword was that the sword energy was extremely strong, but it also meant the greatest consumption. In Lin Yuxian's current realm, such a sword move was absolutely forced. Once the 22nd blade was used, Gu Xingyun would be seriously injured by his own sword intent even if he didn't do anything. Lin Yuxian's body almost collapsed when he was caught between Gu Xingyun and his own sword intent. If Li Tianlan arrived a few seconds later, the young heavenly son of the Lin clan might really die on the spot tonight. It's my first time here. Li Tianlan rummaged out a medicine box and said flatly, "The nominal owner of the villa belongs to a Germanic businessman." Clipped Jason Andres. It seems to be this name. A Germanic businessman with no special background. His real identity is the supermaster in Samsara Palace, second only to military counselor and saint. His code name is General. In other words, this was Qin Weibai's property. Qin Weibai had 9 properties in Huiting, and there were 2 mansions on Winter Mountain that cost more than 9 figures. The villa in Silver Lake was one of them. When Qin Weibai first appeared around him 3 years ago, she collected his fingerprints. With his fingerprints, Li Tianlan could enter and exit all her properties at will. When the army surrounded Winter Mountain, the Silver Lake Villa area, where the rich gathered and the great hidden power, was the best hiding place. "Oh, General, I've heard of it." Lin Yuxian whistled, but his smile was already a little forced. His face was pale. Because of excessive blood loss, his body became extremely cold, and his teeth began to tremble uncontrollably. Li Tianlan frowned and waved his hand. Silently, Lin Fengting's broken clothes disappeared without a trace. F*ck me. Lin Yuxian's face changed. He took a deep breath and said in shock, "What are you doing?" F*ck your sister. Apply the medicine. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. "Lie down. If you don't stop bleeding, you won't be able to see the sun tomorrow." "Damn you, my sister is only 17 this year." Lin Yuxian gnashed his teeth. "Don't even think about it. Get lost." Li Tianlan laughed and scolded him. He applied some extremely expensive hemostatic medicine with a special formula to Lin Yuxian's badly mutilated back and then threw the medicine directly to him. "If you can move, get up and apply the medicine by yourself." Lin Yuxian, who had goosebumps all over his body, hummed and climbed up, and applied the ointment with trembling hands. Li Tianlan rummaged through the medicine box again, and threw 2 bottles of internal healing potions at her. "You should also have healing potions, right? It's all destroyed." Lin Yuxian said angrily, "Damn it. Even if it is not destroyed, everything will be gone when you wave your hand just now." Li Tianlan smiled, took off his severely damaged white clothes, and moved his body. "I'll stay here for the next few days. I don't have Jianghu state nationality. Even if I did, I couldn't go to the final maneuver to help you." Lin Yuxian was silent for a while and suddenly said, "All right." Li Tianlan put the white clothes in his hand on the sofa beside him and sat down. The blood stains on his body slowly stopped, and intense pain began to spread from every corner of his body. Lin Yuxian's face was a little pale, but he was relieved. He could feel anything, even if it was pain. It was much better than being numb. He quietly recalled the collision of his sword with Gu Xingyun tonight. The sea in the 10th unique domain. The light after shattering the heavens. The light and the sea intertwined and surged. The entire scene was constantly being broken down. The sea became sword intent, and the light also became sword intent. The scene became clearer and clearer. Every time the sword intent trembled, it was like a spiritual light that attacked his soul. Lin Yuxian was in a trance. The sword intent kept replaying in his mind. The clear sword intent once again became the sea and the light. He suddenly remembered a saying. The mountain was a mountain, and the water was water. The mountain was not a mountain, and the water was not water. The mountain was still a mountain, and the water was still water. In the sword intent that had become the light and the sea again, the white clothes suddenly appeared in the middle of the light and the sea. He himself was like the sword intent, but also like nothingness. He gently pointed one finger to break the sea. Lin Yuxian was suddenly shocked, and his closed eyes opened again. It was not until he recalled that moment in his mind that he suddenly found that Li Tianlan's state at that moment was so deep and vast. He suddenly appeared in the sword intent of shattering the heavens and the 10th unique domain silently. Existence had form. But Lin Yuxian couldn't tell the form of Li Tianlan's existence at that moment. He was nothingness like a sword intent, but also like the air. He clearly existed, but there was no trace. Lin Yuxian took a deep breath. From the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm to the peak, he had been stuck for 2 years. Tonight, there seemed to be an extremely huge opportunity. He hesitated for a moment, but still asked, Tianlan. What realm are you in now? I don't know. Li Tianlan shook his head. It can be regarded as the invincible realm, but it can also be regarded as no realm. My path is different from yours, so it's hard to give me an accurate position in the chi-controlling realm, the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, the thunder-shocking realm, the half-step invincible realm, and even the invincible realm. The realm is fake, and it's good that my combat capability is there. A completely different path. Lin Yuxian froze for a moment. He knew that Li Tianlan's path was different from today's martial arts, but the so-called different and completely different were two different concepts. All of Lin Yuxian's words were stuck in his throat. How precious was a completely different path of martial arts. It seemed that the relationship between him and Li Tianlan was not enough to share such a secret. Li Tianlan didn't mind this. The Lin clan and the Li family were of the same origin, and they stood together this time. When Lin Yuxian needed to answer questions, he didn't mind saying more. Since he made basic level of martial arts, there were really few young people who were qualified to discuss martial arts with him. The most tragic thing was that they were all enemies. Lin Yuxian was undoubtedly the best topic. What is martial arts? Li Tianlan looked at Lin Yuxian and asked seriously. Martial arts is the sword. Lin Yuxian answered without hesitation. Li Tianlan smiled, and his eyes were warm. There was no doubt that this was the Lin clan's martial arts philosophy. Because they were of the same origin, this was also the Li family's martial arts philosophy. In the hearts of the Li family and the Lin clan, the so-called martial arts were swords. This is our internal statement. In the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City, there are also different opinions among them. Li Tianlan smiled and said, in the Wang family of Beihai, martial arts is about breaking out. In Kunlun City, martial arts is the formation, which is the essence of our unique skills. In the eyes of many people who don't have powerful legacies, the so-called martial arts is the rise of realms. What's wrong with that? Lin Yuxian wondered. That's right. Li Tianlan nodded. We just have different ideas. In my opinion, the so-called martial Tao is invincibility. Only invincibility. The martial way was invincible. Lin Yuxian shuddered all over. Sword chi, explosiveness, sword formations, and the pursuit of a higher level. They are all correct, but they are all fake. Isn't our ultimate goal of practicing martial arts to be invincible in the world? If we don't even have this goal, with such courage, even if we practice martial arts, we can only be non-entities. So martial arts is the combat capability, invincibility. We pursue sword intent, the Wang family of Beihai pursues explosiveness, and Kunlun City pursues sword formations. Our absolute arts all have their own essence. Unlike most people who only pursue realms, our battle prowess can far surpass others of the same realm. We have enough confidence to laugh at them because they only care about pursuing realms and don't seriously temper themselves. This is putting the cart before the horse. Li Tianlan said calmly. In fact, it's quite ridiculous. When we laughed at them before, why didn't we reflect on ourselves? Sword intent is the essence of the Li family and the Lin clan. It is the key to the road to invincibility left by the patriarch. The so-called inheritance is just the key. We practice martial arts to be invincible in the world. When we laugh at others for not paying attention to honing themselves, how many people have thought about whether we have forgotten our original intention? Sword intent is our essence, but we've always pursued pure sword intent, and we've limited ourselves. Is the martial arts we pursue sword intent? Ridiculous. It is invincibility. From the beginning to the end, it should be invincibility. Sword intent is just an inheritance. It is not a goal we pursue, but a tool on the way to our pursuit of invincibility. The Lin clan and the Li family never lack talented people, and so does the Wang family of Beihai. Why haven't we had a chosen one with real absolute dominance in the dark world for hundreds of years? That's because in the process of gradually becoming stronger, they all got into a dead end and couldn't get out. Lin Youxian's face became paler. He should have been extremely cold due to excessive blood loss, but now his head was full of cold sweat. He suddenly remembered the thought that almost made him break through just now. In his memory, Gu Xingyun's 10th unique domain, his break of the sky. All of them were sword intent. Only sword intent. Martial arts. He also got into a dead end of pursuing sword intent. As his sword intent grew stronger, his martial arts seemed to be farther and farther away from him. Lin Fengting's face was completely pale. I also use a sword. Li Tianlan whispered, but in my opinion, my sword is a sword. Without a sword, I can use a saber. Without a saber, I can kill people with my fists. There is no right or wrong in martial arts. You have a great reason, but you can't be invincible in the world. That's wrong. You don't know shit, but you will be invincible in the world in the end. That's right. In the so-called martial arts, strength is supreme. Isn't that so? What is your current kendo? Lin Yuxian recalled Li Tianlan's sword intent. The Li family's sword intent was sharp and fierce, while the Wang family of Beihai's sword intent was turbulent and explosive. What about Li Tianlan? His sword intent was incomparably illusory, but it was extremely real. Heaven-cutting style. Sea-breaking style. Whether it was real or illusory, in terms of conception, it seemed to be a notch higher than sharpness and explosive. What is kendo? Li Tianlan laughed, and his voice was extremely firm. Kendo is kendo. That's all. From simplicity to complexity, from complexity to simplicity, returning to simplicity. The mountain was still the mountain, and the water was still the water. To be specific, my path is different from yours. My path starts with the invincible realm. I was like a sudden thunder at the age of 17 and recultivated. At the age of 19, I temporarily entered the invincible realm and made great achievements. I have experienced the scenery of the 4 realms of martial arts and the invincible realm, which is also a very precious wealth. It is also the foundation of my invincible realm, so recultivation is still a realm. Li Tianlan whispered, if I really want to divide my martial arts into realms, I would like to call my 2 recultivation Nirvana realm. That is, the foundation of the invincible realm. If the foundation is solid, I need to accumulate power and pursue the momentum of the invincible realm. After the general trend is formed, it is time to ask the heart. With the heart of the invincible realm, the essence, qi, and spirit are completely condensed, and that is the final detachment. Martial arts itself depends on itself. The foundation of the invincible realm. The momentum of the invincible realm. The heart of the invincible realm. Finally it transcended. At that time, Lin Yuxian muttered to himself, at that time, can I still be in the invincible realm? Chapter 363. Lin Yuxian did not deny this. Li Tianlan's martial arts were clearly in front of him. If Li Tianlan was right, when he reached the end, he would be truly invincible in the world. What he wanted was the real invincibility, not the simple invincible realm. This was Li Tianlan's boldness. Lin Yuxian could not speak for a long time. Li Tianlan said a lot, but compared with martial arts it was very little, but the impact on him was unparalleled. Martial arts, sword intent, inheritance, unique skills, invincibility. All kinds of concepts were so clear that the opportunity for him to break through the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was right in front of him. This opportunity was even enough to affect his road to the invincible realm in the future. This was the grandest and most distant martial arts. Heaven and earth were like a cage. Even if one was invincible, it was difficult to transcend. Only the real transcendence could be called Tao. Thank you. Lin Yuxian looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously. His eyes were a little complicated and self-deprecating. There were young chosen ones in Jianghu state, and naturally there were also in Europe and America. This small circle of young and top people almost represented the top combat capability of the dark world in the next few decades. Lin Yuxian thought that he was not worse than anyone, but at this time, he suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Including himself, when all of them were confident that they could become the chosen one of the generation, they did not even figure out martial arts. How ridiculous was that? Lin Yuxian vaguely seemed to see his own path, but the real chosen one had already walked on the most correct path and was far ahead of everyone else. He shook his head subconsciously, with a complicated mood. Did you get something? Li Tianlan asked. Lin Yuxian nodded seriously and said, Li Tianlan laughed and was a little happy. Come on, he said. It could be foreseen that with the relationship between the Lin clan and the Li family, Lin Yuxian would be his absolute ally when Qin Weibai controlled the Lin clan in the future. An ally with no problems in terms of combat capability, potential, family background, and position. Lin Yuxian's continuous strength was more in line with Li Tianlan's interests. So now, is the 24 moves of sword completely useless to you? Lin Yuxian asked. How is it possible? Li Tianlan smiled and said, without the 24 moves of sword, I would not have today's sword intent. This supreme art was the best path to invincibility, but it was not the path to becoming a heavenly talent. Back then, our ancestral master was no weaker than a heaven's chosen. That was because this sword Tao was created by him. Since it's self-created, it's naturally the most suitable for me. My sword Tao isn't perfect yet. It only has 9 forms. Cutting the heavens and breaking the seas are among them. There are still 2 comprehensive styles. Everything has just begun. After I perfect it, I don't know whether my kendo will only have 1 style or it will surpass the 24 moves of sword in number. Lin Yuxian nodded thoughtfully. He felt that he had overlooked something, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He turned around and went upstairs. This villa built by the water had not been inhabited for a long time, so it was inevitable that some dust had accumulated in the bedroom. There was a row of men's clothes in the closet, all of which were customized according to Li Tianlan's body shape. They were so new that even the labels were not torn off. Li Tianlan wiped the blood on his body, changed his clothes, went downstairs, and threw another set to Lin Yuxian. Make do with it. When you get better, I'll buy a suitable one. Lin Yuxian took the clothes and put them on. He tidied up his cuffs, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw Li Tianlan sitting on the sofa, staring at the white clothes. What a pity, Li Tianlan said softly, his tone full of regret. Cloud silk was a well-deserved treasure in the dark world. Not to mention its function of being warm in winter and cool in summer, its incredible tenacity was enough to make any master crazy. At least half of the power below the thunder-shocking realm could be resisted by cloud silk. Even in the fight with Gu Qianchuan just now, Gu Qianchuan's less than half of the power was neutralized by cloud silk. Less than half, it didn't sound much, but it was a battle of the invincible realm. Cloud silk can be repaired. In terms of the technical level of Jianghu state, the Dongqing clan can do this, and it won't take too long. About a month should be enough. Lin Yuxian looked at the broken white clothes with some envy. The most precious thing about cloud silk was not its tenacious defense, but its rarity. It could only be found by chance. Jianghu state was now the world's most powerful country, with vast land and abundant resources. But there were only 4 clothes made purely of cloud silk, not counting Li Tianlan's. They were the 4 spirits armor, which was famous in the dark world. Samsara Palace had sacrificed a lot of manpower and material resources to get these cloud silk, but they gave them to Li Tianlan after getting them. Lin Yuxian was quite envious of Qin Weibai's deep love for Li Tianlan at all costs, and he admired the generosity of the master of Samsara Palace. If the master of Samsara Palace, who held the murderous weapon Blue Sky Underworld, put on this clothes, her strength could even go to a higher level. Li Tianlan nodded, put away the cloud silk and said slowly, "Give it to Rushi first. Repair it as soon as possible. I guess it will be used soon. After the final maneuver, I may go to Snow Country." Snow Country. Lin Yuxian nodded instinctively, but as soon as he said it, he suddenly froze. He finally realized what he had ignored. Tonight, all this was so exciting that he ignored the final maneuver. Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanzhan, and Jiang Shangyu teamed up to deal with Li Tianlan in the final maneuver. Li Tianlan had just cut off one of Gu Qianquan's arms, and he forced Gu Xingyun, who had recovered some strength, to flee. When they came back, Lin Yuxian could clearly see the blood all over Li Tianlan's body. In his current state, could he still participate in the final maneuver? How are your injuries? Lin Yuxian hesitated. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and rolled up his cuffs. There was still some dark red blood on his arm, and there was a wound that had just been torn. But at this moment, his wound was no longer bleeding, and it began to heal gradually. Lin Yuxian opened his eyes wide. My internal injury is not serious, and the external injury has begun to heal. It's not a big problem. Li Tianlan paused and continued, I'll be fine after a sleep. Lin Yuxian was silent for a long time. Then he took a deep breath and scolded with a smile. F***ck, I have seen the videos of your previous 2 moves. I thought your physical strength was your biggest weakness. Now it seems ridiculous. Weakness? Li Tianlan was stunned and did not speak. His martial arts had reached the basic level, and his sword intent had already taken shape. But it was just the beginning. His strongest point right now was his body. Lin Yuxian slowly stood up from the sofa and went upstairs alone. I should be able to break through these days. If you are not here, I will go to the East Emperor Palace to find you. Li Tianlan said. Lin Yuxian went upstairs, found a room at random, and went in. Li Tianlan's interpretation of martial arts and his own understanding of martial arts constantly collided with dazzling aura and sparks in his mind. Lin Yuxian sat on the bed, closed his eyes, concentrated, and calmed down. In the endless aura, he gradually entered the state of meditation. At the moment when his consciousness returned to concentration and purity, Lin Yuxian suddenly thought of his sword again. That sword was not the break of the sky. It was the 9th blade, Dusk. The sword that should have pierced Gu Xingyun's body eventually pierced the girl's chest. At that time, in the dim yellow sky, Lin Yuxian did not see the girl's appearance clearly. Now in retrospect, he only felt that the girl's eyes were so bright and delicate. He did not know how the girl was now. The one upstairs was meditating, and the one downstairs was contemplating. The lights in the hall gradually went out. Li Tianlan stood in front of the window and quietly looked at Winter Mountain outside the Silver Lake Villa. It was late at night outside the window. Lights were everywhere on Winter Mountain. It had been nearly 3 hours since Gu Xingyun was attacked, but things did not subside. Instead, they became more and more intense. More and more people came to Winter Mountain. Li Tianlan watched silently, but he was calculating the gains and losses of tonight. He wanted to kill Gu Xingyun, but Gu Xingyun escaped. It was unexpected but reasonable. As an invincible realm expert who ranked 5th on the divine list, no matter how poor he was, he would have the ability to save his life at the critical moment. Li Tianlan felt a little regretful, but he was not upset. Gu Qianquan lost an arm, which seemed to be a gain. But Li Tianlan was very clear that if he was decisive enough at that time and did not chase Gu Xingyun, Gu Qianquan, an expert on the holy list with a broken arm, would probably die tonight. However, if he killed Gu Qianquan and missed the time to chase, Lin Yuxian would also die. Tonight's battle seemed to be reckless, but the consequences should not be too serious. The army came to Winter Mountain, which proved that the attack on Gu Xingyun was no longer a secret. But the most important thing was whether Gu Xingyun would say that the person who attacked him was him. Once Gu Xingyun said that he attacked him, all the majesty of Kunlun City would collapse in an instant. More than 20 years ago, they worked hard to overthrow the Li family with everything they had. More than 20 years later, a descendant of the Li family, who had not yet grown up, broke the arm of the second in Kunlun City and made the god of war of Jianghu state flee? This matter was a joke no matter how he looked at it. Of course, Li Tianlan was also very sober. If Gu Xingyun had absolute certainty to nail him, even if the majesty of Kunlun City was gone, he would still identify him. Attacking the god of war of Jianghu state. Such a crime could be regarded as treason. If Gu Xingyun had conclusive evidence, he could absolutely use the whole Jianghu state to completely crush him and the Li family. But the problem was that he could not produce enough evidence. He wore a mask tonight. Such a ridiculous cover could play a big role at a critical moment. He did not use the 24 moves of sword of the Li family. All the sword intent returned to nothingness. Except for Lin Yuxian, no one around him knew his plan tonight. As long as he left Winter Mountain, Kunlun City could not produce any evidence. Perhaps Kunlun City would use its own power to nail him to death, but now the Li family was no longer fighting alone. The giant group would not sit idly by, and the academics would no longer have an ambiguous attitude on this kind of thing. Instead, they would clearly support him. In this way, this matter might not be too small, but in the final analysis, it was just a quarrel at the meeting of the decision-making committee. Kunlun City was even very likely not to tell him, but to secretly retaliate. But Gu Qianxuan was not to be feared. Gu Xingyun, Li Tianlan smiled. He did miss the opportunity to kill Gu Qianxuan tonight. But he also got a lot. At least, the result tonight was in line with his expectations. It was a pity that Gu Xingyun did not die, but it was not unacceptable. At the symposium, he had roughly confirmed the degree of Gu Xingyun's serious injury, so he took action tonight. After tonight, Gu Xingyun forced his seriously injured body to burst out his strength, and his injury would be more serious. Even if Gu Xingyun could not die, he could not recover in a short time. It could be foreseen that at least in the next 3 to 5 years, the threat from the absolute strength of Kunlun City that he had to face would become minimal. The pressure that the Li family and he had to face was directly reduced by half. The Wang family of Beihai was still so powerful that it made people desperate. But optimistically, the current situation was much better than the alliance between the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Without the threat of Kunlun City, the Li family could also put more energy on the Wang family of Beihai. Compared with losing the opportunity to kill Gu Qianxuan, it was more worthwhile to prolong Gu Xingyun's recovery period. Li Tianlan clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "It's worth it." Between gains and losses, whether it was worth it or not, once there was a clear result, there would be no choice. The sky gradually brightened. The morning sun leaped out of the sea, and the sky was clear. The sun shone on Mount Dibbing with birds chirping and flowers. The verdant and bright Mount Dibbing was quiet and peaceful, just like a paradise. Wang Yuetong quietly cleaned her room. Her movements were careful and serious, and she did not miss any corner. This was a room full of the soft atmosphere of a young girl. It was large, but not empty. The pale pink walls were warm and soft. The hazy gauze curtain fluttered with the fresh sea breeze blowing through the window. The wind chimes hanging in the room made a pleasant sound. The room was full of large and small plush toys. Some of them were a little old, but they were very clean. Wang Yuetong finished cleaning the room and put all the plush toys one by one. Looking at the spotless bedroom, her eyes were very sad, but there was a hint of a smile in them. A small suitcase was placed at her feet. There were only a few sets of clothes in the suitcase. In fact, there was nothing to pack. She came back this time just to have a look. This room, this palace, this mountain, and even the whole province. When she came back again, she did not know when it would be. "Tong, have you really made up your mind?" A soft and gentle voice sounded behind Wang Yuetong. Summer Solstice walked into the room and reached out to gently stroke Wang Yuetong's short hair. Her eyes were doting and complicated. "Yes." Wang Yuetong nodded hard. "Young people are so naive." Summer Solstice sighed softly and said, "I believe Li Tianlan likes you. But can you be sure whether he loves you or not? The positions between you are destined to bear unimaginable pressure and even torture when you are together in the future. Can you imagine that kind of pain?" "I know." Wang Yuetong whispered, "I have thought about these problems very seriously. But I really can't let him go. It may not be easy in the future, but if I give up on him, maybe my life will be more difficult." "Mom, I have decided." Her voice lowered. "I really have decided." Summer Solstice sighed softly, took out a card, and gave it to Wang Yuetong. Wang Yuetong shook her head subconsciously. This time when she returned to the Wang family of Beihai, although it was not to break off the relationship with the family, it basically meant leaving the family with nothing. This card was the wealth of the Wang family of Beihai. How could she take it? "Take it as the dowry I prepared for you," Summer Solstice said with a smile. She had said too much to persuade her, but her daughter had made it clear that she wanted to go all the way. No matter how much she said, it would not work. "Take it." Summer Solstice put the card in her daughter's hand, blinked and whispered, "This is my private money. In the future, treat yourself better when you are outside." "Silly girl, No matter what happens, don't wrong yourself, especially when you get along with Li Tianlan. Don't give in unconditionally. The feelings between a man and a woman are simple and complicated. It's okay once or twice, but how can there be happiness if you feel wronged too much? If you are not happy, the couple will become a couple with resentment. I don't know what will happen to you in the future, but anyway, you have to remember that this is what you are willing to give up everything for. For a woman, such an opportunity only comes once in her life, and it is a big gamble. If you win, you will be happy. If you lose, your heart will die. Tong, no matter what will happen to you in the future, even if you can't be together and become enemies, I don't want you to hate him. I'm not optimistic about him, but I feel sorry for you. Hating a person is often harder than loving a person. Wang Yuetong blinked desperately, nodded silently, and whispered, Mom, I won't hate him and I won't regret it. Summer Solstice smiled again and whispered, Well, if you are unhappy in the future, you can come back. You are our daughter. We are a family, and we don't need to apologize. If he is not good to you, tell me, and I will find someone to deal with him. Wang Yuetong took a deep breath and did not speak. She bent down to pick up the suitcase on the ground and quickly walked out of the room. Summer Solstice looked at her daughter's back and sighed softly. There seemed to be a faint exclamation downstairs. Summer Solstice walked out of the room. In her sight, her daughter had reached the hall downstairs. At this time, her husband was standing quietly in front of her. Summer Solstice wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, she kept silent. Wang Yuetong looked at her father in front of her in a panic. Wang Tianzong's face was calm without the slightest emotion. His eyes swept over the suitcase in Wang Yuetong's hand. Wang Yuetong's body trembled slightly, and she subconsciously wanted to let go of her hand. But then she realized what it meant. Her face turned pale, and she held the suitcase tightly. Dad! Wang Yuetong called softly. She glanced at her father and whispered, I'm leaving. Where are you going? Wang Tianzong asked. To Huiting. Wang Yuetong bit her lip. Thinking of her destination and her man, she seemed to have more courage. I'm going to find Tianlan. A few hours ago, Li Tianlan attacked Gu Xingyun in Huiting. Gu Qianchuan's arm was destroyed by him, and Gu Xingyun was injured again. I have to admit that I was wrong at that time. Even in my eyes, Li Tianlan is now a big shot. You have a good taste in men. Wang Tianzong showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Not only Wang Yuetong, but also Summer Solstice, who heard the news, was shocked and had an incredible expression on her face. Wang Yuetong was not surprised, but panicked. She didn't think about Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan at all. She just asked subconsciously, How is Tianlan? I don't know. Wang Tianzong shook his head. Wang Yuetong said nothing and was about to go out. Wang Tianzong reached out and stopped his daughter. Stay here for a few days. Wang Tianzong said calmly. Wang Yuetong's body stiffened. She looked at Wang Tianzong's expression, and her face gradually turned pale. I don't object to you going to Huiting. Wang Tianzong said lightly, but that's after the final maneuver. At that time, if Li Tianlan can survive, I will respect your choice. Wang Yuetong's eyes gradually dimmed. Her father said that if Li Tianlan could survive. But in his tone, Wang Yuetong only heard the killing intent. Tianlan can destroy Gu Qianchuan's arm. My brother is no match for Tianlan. Wang Yuetong bit her lip and said, He may win. Wang Tianzong said calmly, but he must not survive. If he wins the final maneuver, I will personally send him to hell. He said the last sentence resolutely and decisively, leaving no room for negotiation. Wang Yuetong's face was so pale that it seemed transparent. You stay at home. Wang Tianzong said, Everything will wait until the end of the maneuver. He turned around and walked to the gate. Wang Yuetong stared at his back in a daze. Wang Tianzong's figure walked out of the gate and disappeared into the bright sunshine outside. His figure seemed to be shining with a layer of golden light. The gate of the palace was slowly closed. Wang Yuetong suddenly screamed and seemed to use all her strength. If you kill my man, I will hate you for the rest of my life. I hate you. I hate you. Wang Tianzong's footsteps suddenly froze for a moment. His face seemed to flash with a touch of blue. Wang Yuetong's scream was still echoing. Wang Tianzong did not look back and slowly walked down the steps in front of the palace. A man in black stood at the foot of the steps. Seeing Wang Tianzong come out, he bent down and said respectfully, "Your Majesty." "Say it." Wang Tianzong's voice was very cold. "We have confirmed the headquarters of the Samsara Palace." The black-clothed man's body trembled as he quickly spoke. His code name was Xian Ming, and he was responsible for managing all the intelligence agencies of the Wang family of Beihai. "Are you sure?" Wang Tianzong asked. "Yes, I'm sure," Xian Ming said in a deep voice. Wang Tianzong twitched the corner of his mouth, took a deep breath and said, "Let's go now." He left the palace behind him with steady steps. In the palace, Wang Yuetong's hoarse and desperate cries were faintly heard. Wang Tianzong's eyes were complicated, but his footsteps did not stop. Wang Yuetong had a good eye. Li Tianlan was really strong. But Li Tianlan was an enemy. The stronger he was, the faster he would die. Wang Tianzong had made up his mind that if Li Tianlan really won the final maneuver, he would directly kill Li Tianlan on the spot. Even if Lin Fengting fell out with him and fought with him, he would not give in at all. In today's era, if he wanted to kill a person, no one in the whole dark world could stop him. Not Lin Fengting. Not even deity. He had made up his mind at all costs. So he would not pay attention to Li Tianlan. In the final maneuver a few days later, no matter how dazzling he was, he would just kill him with a sword. As long as he killed Li Tianlan, there would be no shadow in the future of the Wang family of Beihai. If he killed him, Wang Tianzong would only get infinite opportunities and light in the future. What he would lose would be the father-daughter relationship for more than 20 years. Chapter 364. A big chapter of 8,000 words, you know. The cold wind never stopped blowing through the mountains. The vast snow was dancing in the air almost forever. It was lonely, monotonous, and cold. Whether it was wind, frost, rain, or snow, whether it was midsummer or winter, the wind and snow here seemed to be always unchanged, with a desolation that seemed to howl to the end of the world. There was a mountain in the snow. There was a city at the foot of the mountain. The exquisite and quaint black city was silent under the snow, black and white, looking extremely mysterious and majestic. Strong wind, heavy snow, high mountains, and black city. Under the sky that seemed to be always gloomy in the northwest, this was an extremely shocking picture. Gu Xingyun stood on the top of the mountain, facing the wind and snow. Kunlun was very big. But this mountain was the highest mountain in a radius of 100 miles. Standing here, the city was at his feet, the mountain was at his feet, and the whole world seemed to be crawling under his feet. Such a high position, Huiting, Yuzhou, and all corners of the world were close at hand. Gu Xingyun could feel his absolute strength and see the absolute glory of Kunlun City. Jianghu State had already stood at the commanding heights of the world. And Kunlun City was at the highest point of Jianghu State. He stood at the peak of Kunlun City, looking down at the world. He had great achievements and unparalleled martial arts. Gu Xingyun laughed. His laughter easily passed through the heaven and earth, and echoed among the mountains and snow. Blood flowed behind him. Dozens of corpses fell behind him, and blood stained a large area of snow. Gu Xingyun turned to look at the corpses. There were not many corpses, but they all had different appearances and figures. Every one of them represented the peak power in the world. Every weapon was a famous magic weapon in the dark world. But now the weapons were broken, and the so-called invincibility all became corpses. Gu Xingyun looked at his arm. There was a black arm guard wrapped around his arm, ferocious and gloomy. This was the human emperor, known as the first murderous weapon in the dark world. Gu Xingyun continued to laugh wildly, arrogantly and presumptuously. At his feet, the famous sword of the Wang family of Beihai, Listen to the Sea, had been broken into 2 pieces. The body of Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong of Jianghu State was almost completely submerged in the wind and snow. After Wang Tianzong, it was Li Honghe, Li Guangtu, deity, Lin Fengting, the master of Samsara Palace, tyrant of the Polar Ground Alliance, Saint War Angel Arcis of the Vatican, Cass Rotter, the god of war of Star State. Each and every famous name had now become a dead man. Gu Xingyun sneered and admired his work. He looked at the corpses one by one, and his expression became more and more satisfied. From beginning to end, when he saw the last corpse, Gu Xingyun frowned. He felt like he had overlooked something. It seemed like there was someone missing from these corpses? Who is missing? Who is still alive? He counted again. Wang Tianzong, Li Honghe, Li Guangtu, Summer Solstice, Situ Tsungyue, and even Li Shi's body were here. He couldn't remember who was missing. Gu Xingyun snorted coldly and said in a cold tone, "They should all be killed." He looked at the horizon. A ball of orange light lit up at the end of the gloomy and snowy world. The moment he entered his line of sight, the orange light suddenly spread out and turned into an endless raging fire. The fire burned the whole sky. The biting cold wind and flying snow all stopped. The burning sky slowly pressed down, the mountains were collapsing, and Haicheng was on the verge of collapse. Gu Xingyun's body seemed to have lost all its strength in an instant. He could only watch the fire full of destruction falling down and wrapping him up completely. Haicheng suddenly collapsed completely. In the loud roar, the world was dark. Gu Xingyun suddenly opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. It was sunny outside the window. The bright light shone through the window, and the room was clean and refreshing. Gu Xingyun's eyes were white, and his mouth and nose were full of the pungent smell of hospital disinfectant. He gasped for breath, and it took him a long time to realize that he had just experienced a dream. In the dream, he was powerful enough to overturn the whole world. The 6 groups in Jianghu state suffered heavy losses under his operation. The Li family and the Wang family of Beihai at their peak were destroyed by him, and all the superpowers in the world surrendered at his feet. At that time, he was very young, high-spirited, and arrogant. That was the most wonderful dream. But now looking back, in the constantly disappearing dream, Gu Xingyun could only feel fear. It was like the fear after experiencing the most terrible nightmare. His heart beat wildly, his head was covered with cold sweat, and his mouth was dry. He took a deep breath and suddenly got up to find water. But as soon as he moved, the tearing pain all over his body suddenly made him fall off the bed. His body trembled violently, and his mind was blank, but his heart was completely sober. He forgot the nightmare and remembered the night when he was attacked. Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan. Gu Xingyun gritted his teeth, endured the severe pain in his body, and moved back to the bed little by little. Like a wounded beast, he gasped deeply. Everything in his sight became completely clear. The room he was in was a ward. It seemed to be a single room, but at this time, there were 3 beds side by side. His bed was in the middle, and on the left was Li Qingqing in a hospital gown. The young girl who had just turned 20 this year was pale, and her long eyelashes blinked uneasily. The sun fell on her, with a kind of beautiful charm. She seemed to be in pain, but her breathing became steady. Gu Xingyun breathed a sigh of relief and looked at his unconscious daughter with complicated eyes. He turned his head and looked at the right side. Gu Qianquan on the right side was also unconscious. Gu Xingyun glanced at him casually, and his movements suddenly froze. He stared at Gu Qianquan lying on the bed. Gu Qianquan was motionless, but there was nothing in the cuff of his clothes. Gu Xingyun had an incredible expression, as if he had seen a ghost in the daytime. There were hurried footsteps outside the door. The ward was pushed open, and a middle-aged man walked quickly into the ward with a solemn face. The man was handsome, but there was a very eye-catching scar on his face. He was slightly short and wore a lieutenant general's military uniform, looking extremely fierce and domineering. "Your Highness, are you okay?" The lieutenant general reached out and shook hands with Gu Xingyun, looking sincere and serious. But Gu Xingyun clearly saw a touch of gloating mockery in the other party's eyes. "I'm okay." Gu Xingyun's tone was cold. Yi Fengqing, the director of Huiting Special Operations Bureau. He was one of the backbone generals of the Wang family of Beihai. Among the experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in Jianghu state, his strength might not be the top, but he was a famous madman. Gu Xingyun was attacked in Huiting, so Yi Fengqing naturally had to visit him because of his position. "It's good that you're okay." Yi Fengqing smiled, pulled a chair at random, and sat down opposite Gu Xingyun. "Minister Zhang Qi is still investigating in Mount Dong. I have to say that the person who attacked you and Marshal Gu Qianquan last night was really bold, but we haven't got too many clues yet. I wonder if you can provide us with some useful information? Oh, by the way, how many of your guards survived? I heard from them that you mentioned Li Tianlan's name?" Gu Qianquan's face changed, and he took a deep look at Yi Fengqing. Yi Fengqing still smiled, but the mockery in his eyes was undisguised. He said meaningfully, "Is it true that the god of war in Jianghu state was seriously injured by a young man?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Gu Xingyun narrowed his eyes. He thought of everything last night, took a deep breath, and made up his mind in a short time. "I haven't seen Li Tianlan. I don't know the person who attacked me last night. This needs your Huating Special Operations Bureau to investigate. If you are short of manpower, you can report to the Special Warfare Headquarters, and Kunlun City can directly intervene." Gu Xingyun's voice was a little distorted and depressed. God knew how aggrieved he was when he said this. But he really didn't have enough evidence to pin Li Tianlan. If he continued to make trouble, the whole Kunlun City would become a joke for Li Tianlan's prestige. He could only hold back his anger. "We'll try our best." Yi Fengqing smiled, stood up and said, "That's it. Your Highness, have a good rest. I've informed Secretary Zhong, and he will come to visit later." He turned and left the ward, his back unrestrained. Gu Xingyun looked at Yi Fengqing's back with a gloomy face, and the corners of his mouth twitched. After a long time, he muttered to himself, "This matter will not end like this." He couldn't find evidence to pin Li Tianlan. But Kunlun City now had far more strength than the Li family, and it had the same position as the Wang family of Beihai. If he couldn't find evidence, then he wouldn't look for it. "He must die! He must die! This bastard! Cut him into pieces and feed him to the dogs." A hoarse, painful voice with great resentment suddenly sounded in Gu Xingyun's ear. Gu Xingyun turned his head. On the bed on his right, Gu Qianquan had woken up. He tightly covered his shoulder with one arm missing. His eyes were chaotic, and his whole face was distorted. He was ferocious and almost crazy. Gu Xingyun's heart was filled with anger. He was attacked and fled, but as long as he could hold on, the problem would not be very big. Gu Qianquan's lost arm was the root of Kunlun City's disgrace. The arm of an invincible realm expert on the holy list was cut off by a young man. In addition to showing that Li Tianlan was amazing enough, it could only show the incompetence of Kunlun City. "How did you end up like this?" Gu Xingyun frowned and asked. Gu Qianquan froze for a moment. He could hear the dissatisfaction in Gu Xingyun's tone. His face turned red in an instant, but he didn't know what to say. Was he careless? Or was he too concerned about Gu Xingyun's comfort? This explanation was objectively acceptable, but in Gu Xingyun's eyes, it undoubtedly showed that he was useless. Gu Qianquan lowered his head and clenched his fists. "If you're okay, take Qingqing and leave Huating first," Gu Xingyun said calmly. Gu Qianquan raised his head subconsciously. "What about you?" "Me?" Gu Xingyun laughed at himself. "I'm afraid that before dark, the news that I was seriously injured by Li Tianlan will spread throughout Jianghu state. If I don't show up, there are even many people who say that I'm dead. How can I go? Where can I go? I must stay to participate in the final maneuver. Before that, I can't go anywhere." If it was in normal times, Gu Xingyun naturally didn't care about these rumors. But now he was really seriously injured, and he was destined not to show up for a long time. In this way, these rumors were deadly enough. So it was impossible for him to leave Huating now. Even if he had to hold on, he had to hold on to the final maneuver. "What about Li Tianlan? Are we just going to let it go?" Gu Qianquan's tone was gloomy. "Let it go?" Gu Xingyun sneered. "He will die. And he will die in the maneuver." He didn't tell Yi Fengqing that it was Li Tianlan who attacked him, and he was not going to tell anyone. But it didn't mean that he would let it go. Let it go? How could it be possible? Gu Xingyun lowered his head, took out his mobile phone from the bag containing his dirty clothes, and dialed a number. Kunlun. In the majestic black city standing in the wind and snow, a white and delicate palm pressed the answer button, but she did not take the initiative to speak. The two ends of the phone were separated by the city, the wind and snow, the mountains and rivers, and the sea. There was only silence and numbness. Gu Xingyun seemed to have adapted to the other party's attitude, so on the phone, his tone did not fluctuate at all. "Come to Huating." His tone was close to a command. "What's the matter?" Li Shi held the mobile phone in her hand tightly and asked numbly. "Kill a man for me." Gu Xingyun's tone was cold. "Didn't you say that you had nothing to do with the Li family?" Very well, in the final maneuver, I will give you a chance to prove yourself. I want you to kill Li Tianlan in person at the scene of the maneuver. I don't want to hear nonsense. Come here right now. In the case that he was seriously injured, it was difficult for Gu Qianchuan to check and balance Li Tianlan. Kunlun City did not have so many deep foundations and secret troops with amazing destructive power. Even if there were, Gu Xingyun did not want to waste them on Li Tianlan. It was the safest choice to let Li Shi do it. When everyone marveled that there were 3 invincible realm experts in the high-end combat capability of the Jiang family of South America, only a few people knew that there were also 3 invincible realm experts in Kunlun City. There were only 2 invincible realm experts left in the Jiang family of South America. And there were still 3 in Kunlun City. What few people knew was that, as the governor of Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun was not the strongest expert in Kunlun City. In terms of strength, Li Shi, who came from Kunlun City and was favored by Li Guangtu in those days, was the strongest expert in Kunlun City. She had the 10th unique domain and the 24 moves of sword in her body. The numb and silent madam of the governor was the strongest expert in Kunlun City. Li Shi was silent and did not speak for a long time. What? Bitch, you don't want to do it. Gu Xingyun's tone gradually became irritable. Li Shi's hand holding the phone was still trembling, and her face was so pale that it seemed transparent. I have done it. She tried hard to control her emotions. 3 years ago in Heaven Capital, I killed him once. But he is not dead. Gu Xingyun said in a cold tone. Then you kill him again and finish what you failed to do 3 years ago. Otherwise, I can't guarantee Qingqing's fate. Li Shi's face became paler. Qingqing. Qingqing again. Her trip to Heaven Capital 3 years ago was related to her daughter, Li Qingqing. At that time, if she did not go to Heaven Capital, Gu Xingyun would put Li Qingqing in Heaven Capital and even arrange her to be with Li Tianlan quietly. That result was equivalent to fundamentally determining Li Qingqing's fate in the future. Her daughter would repeat her path, and the old things would be reincarnated again. So she stopped Gu Xingyun and went to Heaven Capital in person. And recently, Gu Xingyun asked her to go to Huiting, which was exactly the same threat as that year. It was very despicable. But it was absolutely effective. After the matter in Huiting is over, you will go to Snow Country on behalf of Kunlun City. I will return your daughter to you afterward. Gu Xingyun said and hung up the phone directly. Li Shi seemed to be drained of all her strength in an instant. She put down the phone numbly. After a long silence, she slowly turned around and walked out of the door. The wind and snow outside the door were still howling. The whole black city looked more and more gloomy. A maid came over and said respectfully and cleverly, Madam, prepare the helicopter. Li Shi said numbly, I'm going to Huiting. In the era of explosive communication, any so-called intelligence was just a matter of a phone call or an email. If they were more cautious, it was just a matter of an encrypted phone call or an encrypted email. The attack on Gu Xingyun was a major event in Jianghu State. Major events were often not kept secret. So when the garrison of Huiting, the police, and the Special Operations Bureau rushed to Winter Mountain together, Wang Xianxia had already received a call from Yi Fengqing, the director of the Special Operations Bureau of Huiting. When he received the call, Wang Xianxia was still chatting with Xianxia in bed. But after listening to the content of the phone, Wang Xianxia, who had been calm since he broke through to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, changed his face completely. He kept the weird posture of answering the phone. Until a long time after Yi Fengqing hung up the phone, his movements did not change at all. There was no anger, no jealousy, no unwillingness. He sat quietly, and his eyes were full of surprise, doubt and bitterness. What's wrong? Xianxia clearly noticed Wang Xianxiao's unusual behavior. She put on her pajamas and sat beside him. Wang Xianxia was motionless and unresponsive. When Xianxia asked for the 3rd time, he took a deep breath and glanced at Xianxia. You said. Wang Xianxiao's voice was a little erratic, but his eyes gradually became calm. If I fight with all my strength now, how strong can I be? Xianxia was thoughtful. Wang Xianxiao was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. But he had a top inheritance and was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm with wind and thunder veins. Such a person was strong enough to crush and even defeat all opponents in the same realm in any realm. How strong was Wang Xianxiao? Xianxia thought for a moment and said softly, If you fight with all your strength, You should be able to fight against the top half-step invincible realm now. Ordinary half-step invincible realm experts will not be your match. Really strong. Xianxia laughed, but it was a little self-deprecating. How am I now compared to Brother Jiang? Brother Jiang? Xianxia was a little confused. She thought for a moment and said uncertainly, Milord Di Jiang? Xianxia nodded. Milord Di Jiang is His Majesty's disciple. Now he has the combat capability of the invincible realm. He is about to become the youngest marshal in Jianghu state. Compared with him, you are still a little worse. Xianxia said cautiously. Yes, I am indeed a little worse. Xianxia whispered to himself, but compared with Gu Qianchuan, Brother Jiang is also a little worse. Xianxia was silent. Although Di Jiang with double thunder veins had not entered the invincible realm for the time being, compared with Gu Qianchuan who had just broken through the invincible realm, he should be on par or slightly stronger. But Gu Qianchuan had been in the invincible realm for 8 years. He had stabilized his realm, further understood the 10 skills of true martial arts, and successfully entered the holy list. Di Jiang was not in the invincible realm, so he was indeed a little inferior to Gu Qianchuan. But just a few hours ago, Li Tianlan attacked the purple gold pavilion. He not only broke Gu Qianchuan's arm, but also forced Gu Xingyun to flee. Xianxia finally smiled bitterly, and his eyes became more and more confused. How did he do all this? Xi's face changed dramatically. It was not a big deal to force Gu Xingyun to flee. Gu Xingyun had been seriously injured. But it was really incredible that he broke Gu Qianchuan's arm. Had Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm? How could a 22-year-old invincible realm expert bear such a huge force? It's fake. Xianxia did not even think much and said instinctively. Xianxia glanced at her and did not speak. He could imagine how much influence the news would have after it spread throughout Jianghu state. A great uproar was not enough to describe it. If there was a word to describe it, it would be stormy waves. Li Tianlan still had potential. But after what happened tonight, he not only had potential, but his combat capability would also be recognized. He broke Gu Qianchuan's arm. Even if he was not in the invincible realm, he at least had the combat capability of the invincible realm. From now on, calling Li Tianlan Your Highness was really worthy of his name. And from today on, Li Tianlan had the value that all the young people, including Xianxia and Gu Hanshan, did not have. How did the gap come about? How could it get farther and farther away? Xianxia did not know, but he knew very well that if he did not fight hard, he might not even be able to see Li Tianlan's back. If it's true. Xi's face was a little pale and even a little panicked. Then in the final maneuver you... No! Xianxia whispered, he is really strong, but not strong enough to make me retreat without a fight. But if you insist, who can guarantee that Gu Hanshan and Jiang Shangyu will also insist? Xi's tone was hurried. They are them, and I am me. Even if they all abstain, I will appear on the battlefield. If I don't even have the courage to fight, I don't know what the Wang family of Beihai will become under my leadership in the future. Xianxia glanced at Xianxia calmly. It was already the early morning of the 24th. There was less than a week before the final maneuver. I want to meditate. Xianxia said, it's time to get ready. No matter the outcome at least, I still have half a sword to choose. Xi's face kept changing. Xianxia did have half a sword to choose. 3 years ago in Heaven Capital, he had used the sword intent of firmament to use the half-six paths. 3 years later, he had stood at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and could barely use the half-reincarnation. Although it was the half-reincarnation. But as long as he drew his sword, Xianxia believed that even in the face of the invincible realm, he could be invincible. Dongqing Wudi flew back to Zhongyuan from Yuzhou overnight. But when the sun rose, Dongqing Hongguang, whose biological clock had always been very regular, went downstairs and saw his son in a marshal's uniform sitting in the dining room eating breakfast at first glance. Dongqing Wudi was dealing with the soup dumplings in front of him. He ate very slowly, chewing and swallowing slowly, but his movements were extremely firm. In front of Dongqing Hongguang, he was a filial son. In front of Bai Qingqian, he was an incompetent husband. But in front of the soldiers of Jianghu state, He was always the invincible god of massacre of Jianghu state. This was a man who could give people a feeling of indomitable will even when eating. Dongqing Hanguang, who had not slept in the second half of the night, gave up the plan to go out for a walk and walked into the dining room. He waved his hand, motioned his son who had stood up to sit down and asked casually, "When did you come back?" "Less than 2 hours." Dongqing Wudi swallowed the steamed bun and said calmly, "Did you hear the news last night?" Dongqing Hanguang picked up a steamed bun and whispered, "Yes." Dongqing Wudi laughed, with a kind of brilliance different from iron-blooded killing on his face. "Good boy." He cut off one of Gu Qianchuan's arms. Standing in front of him, "I'm no longer his opponent." Amazing. If he grows up smoothly, he may really enter the invincible realm before the age of 30. Dongqing Hanguang also smiled, but there was some worry in his eyes. "I said the stronger he is, the more dangerous he is. If his injury last night was not serious, he should win in the final maneuver. But the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Kunlun City is not to be feared." Dongqing Wudi said, "Gu Xingyun is seriously injured, and Gu Qianchuan's arm is broken. There is no threat for the time being." "Stupid." Dongqing Hanguang's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan are not a threat, but how can you be sure that woman will not take action?" "That woman?" Dongqing Wudi's face changed, and he was silent. In a sense, the woman's breakthrough into the invincible realm was the most important opportunity for Kunlun City to make up its mind to overthrow Li Kuang-tu. If she joins forces with the Wang family of Beihai, she and Wang Tianzong, how can Tianlan survive? Dongqing Hanguang said slowly. Dongqing Wudi picked up a steamed bun and put it in his mouth. He slowly bit the steamed bun and said slowly, "It's okay." Dongqing Hanguang glanced at him. Tianlan is still young, and there are some things that he should not bear. The younger generation's affairs should be solved by the younger generation. If they want to bully the weak, they have to ask for my permission. He sneered slightly. Wang Tianzong? And that woman? She is really strong. But what can she do no matter how strong she is? Have you made up your mind? Dongqing Hanguang's tone was light. It's not determination. Dongqing Wudi smiled. Dad, this is the most correct decision. We may give up something for the time being, but only temporarily. If I don't make this decision this time, when the truth comes out, the people of the Dongqing clan will be disunited. Dongqing Hanguang was silent. Hidden Dragon Sea. After a long silence he suddenly said, "I've met with the president." Dongqing Wudi said calmly, "The president will go abroad for a visit in a few days." Dongqing Hanguang's face relaxed, and he said with a smile, "What are you going to do?" "It's just a head-on confrontation." Dongqing Wudi said, "I'm ready. In addition, I've contacted Qin Wei Bai, and she will secretly cooperate with me on some things." Qin Wei Bai. Dongqing Hanguang's eyes flashed with inexplicable brilliance. She is indeed a strange woman. She is now in Snow Country, and I don't know what she is planning. Snow Country, troubled times, great changes are coming. Dongqing Wudi chuckled. The real storm is coming, hey? Dongqing Hanguang smiled, and his tone was complicated. Snow Country. Mormons. Qin Wei Bai was looking at a document sent from Jianghu State. In the spacious study, a figure shrouded in a black cloak was holding a copy and looking at it seriously. There was not much content in the document. So in just a few minutes, Qin Wei Bai had put the document on the desk. Is my man powerful? Qin Wei Bai patted the document gently. She seemed to be in a good mood, and her laughter was a little loud. Tianlan is in danger. The voice of the man wrapped in a cloak was elegant. His figure looked like a military counselor or a saint, but there were some differences. He put down the copy in his hand, hesitated, and reached out to tear off the cloak on his body. He said helplessly, "I'm really not used to this." How did the two military counselors and saint get used to this thing? After the cloak was taken off, a handsome and elegant face appeared in the study. A face that should have been in Lin and at this time. The patriarch of the Lin clan, Lin Fengting. They're not used to it either. Qin Wei Bai said with a smile, but they have to hide their identities, so they have to get used to it. As the patriarch of the Lin clan, if you don't enter the secular world, you have to suffer for a while. Lin Fengting shook his head helplessly and pointed to the document on the table. Once the news gets out, Tianlan will be in danger. Tianzong and Kunlun City will definitely not let him go. Maybe they will take action at the scene of the final maneuver. He paused and said, "Am I too early?" "It's okay." Qin Weibai shook her head with certainty. Her voice was very soft and her tone was very confident. Dongqing Wudi is trustworthy. As long as he is here, Tianlan will be fine. You can only protect him for a while in Zhongzhou State. It doesn't make much sense. As long as the deterrent of the Dongqing clan is still there, no one will dare to act rashly. Between the top force and the super-wealthy family, in terms of power the super-wealthy family is better. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Then what am I doing here now?" "It doesn't seem to make sense here. It's easier to find the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance from here. The Polar Ground Alliance is in civil strife, and the tyrant has become a coward. It's really not easy to find him. But I already have a clue, and there will be results in a few days. The final battle will be held in Snow Country, and the Polar Ground Alliance is the best signal." Qin Weibai said calmly. "You mean, the final battle will be held in the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance?" Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows. "No." Qin Weibai shook her head and pointed to her feet. "The final battle will be held here. Snow Country. Mormon City." This was the final battle site that the Samsara Palace, which provoked the chaos in the Dark World, had set up 3 years ago. Lin Fengting just wanted to ask something, and a phone suddenly rang. Qin Weibai looked at the number and answered the phone. "Boss." On the phone, a calm voice sounded. "The fish has taken the bait." Qin Weibai didn't say much and hung up the phone directly. Lin Fengting also heard the phone and asked subconsciously, "The fish has taken the bait. What do you mean?" "I sent someone to attack summer solstice. But I also said that I would give Wang Tianzong a chance to go crazy." Qin Weibai said softly, "So when I sent someone to find the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance, I deliberately used some bait to leak the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. Wang Tianzong has taken the bait." The headquarters of the Samsara Palace. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. "What's there? A tight dragnet? A trap?" "There's nothing." Qin Weibai shook her head. "There's only one opportunity for the final battle." Lin Fengting was silent for a while, and then said in a complicated tone, "If so, it's not necessarily the headquarters of the Samsara Palace, is it?" "It can be regarded as the headquarters." Qin Weibai said, "It's indeed the place where the core members of the Samsara Palace have been stationed for many years. It can be regarded as the headquarters." She hesitated, glanced at Lin Fengting, and continued, "The real headquarters of the Samsara Palace is in Zhongzhou State. It has always been in Zhongzhou State. I put it in the most conspicuous position, but no one can see it." Chapter 365. Deity looked at the sky in Wangtian Pavilion. In the evening, the sky of Heaven Capital was gloomy. The wind was blowing, and it was raining. Benny, the biggest typhoon of the year, was about to land on East Island from Heaven Capital. The roaring hurricane shook the whole city. Looking from above, the whole Heaven Capital was in a frenzy in the hurricane. Deity stood on the rooftop of Wangtian Pavilion, dressed in black. The gale close to level 10 was blowing, and the rain kept falling, but it didn't shake his clothes at all. He just stood there, in a trance. The roaring wind, the pouring rain, and the gloomy sky were all fake, and he was the most real. Deity looked up at the sky. The rain was falling fast, and the sky was gloomy. The night was coming, and there was a touch of darkness in the sky. Deity, dressed in black, seemed to be integrated with the night, and the whole night seemed to become vivid. There was no light in Wangtian Pavilion. The headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital was the tallest building in the entire Heaven Capital. It was pitch black and looked extremely dignified and majestic. On a stormy night, the lightless Sky View Pavilion was like a black monster standing in the Heaven Capital. Occasionally, lightning flashed across the sky. Under the pale electric light, the black Sky View Pavilion looked somewhat ferocious. A white figure appeared in the pitch black but vivid night. The white shadow walked up to the rooftop in a hurry. The moment he saw Deity, he subconsciously slowed down. He held a letter tightly in his hand. Perhaps it was due to his excitement, but his eyes were extremely bright. His handsome and somewhat devilishly handsome face also became a little devilish because of this. Daybreak, the Sinluo Temple Master of Heaven Capital. He was also the person closest to deity in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. This closeness was based on strength and relationship. The murderous weapon of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, Shadow the Ripper, had always been in the hands of Daybreak. This alone was enough to show deity's absolute trust in Daybreak. Your Highness. Daybreak walked behind deity and said respectfully, "What are you so happy about?" Deity said with a chuckle. He was still looking at the night sky, and there was no smile in his eyes, only coldness. A letter from Jianghu State. Daybreak gave the letter in his hand to deity. Deity took it but didn't open it. He already knew what was going to be said in the letter. A lot of news could be passed to him by a phone call. But Jianghu State sent a letter at this time. He didn't need to read it to know that the contents of the letter were not what he wanted to see. Deity silently looked at the envelope in his hand. After a long time, he meticulously tore the envelope open and took out the folded letter inside. There were a few lines of familiar handwriting on the paper, but because it had been too long, they had become somewhat unfamiliar. The handwriting was firm and elegant, but the strokes of the pen moved freely, revealing a kind of unrestrained strength that flowed like clouds and water. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital cannot replace Tiannan. You can't replace this world either. Tianlan is already invincible. Why don't we lower our heads? Why don't you let go? The letter had no opening or ending. There were only a few sentences. Deity squinted at the last 8 words. He might as well lower his head. It was better to let go. His heart was a little cold, but he wasn't angry. He just focused on the letter in front of him, as if he was thinking. How so? Daybreak did not leave. Seeing deity finish reading the letter, he asked casually. Deity stood quietly. Under the heavy rain, his clothes were dry and tidy, but the rain kept falling on the letter. The letter was gradually soaked, broken, and finally turned into scraps of paper, falling into the rain on the rooftop. He wants me to bow my head and let go. Deity's tone was calm. What do you think? Tiannan. Daybreak raised his eyebrows. Tiannan. Deity's tone became more and more indifferent. Daybreak suddenly fell silent. The chaotic sound of wind and rain still rang out. There was thunder rolling above the sky, and the atmosphere on the rooftop was oppressive and dull. I can't control it. Daybreak was silent for a long time before he said blandly. There were only him and deity here, so he spoke casually. You underestimated the extent of the old master's control of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. You also underestimated the tacit understanding between him and Qin Wei Bai. At that time, we marched into Tiannan, and now we can't stop halfway. You were set up by them. The situation in Tiannan is now out of control. Most importantly, you underestimated the speed of Tianlan's growth. A smile appeared on Daybreak's face. He spoke from the standpoint of God, but his eyes became brighter when he mentioned Li Tianlan's strength. This behavior was very weird, which was enough to prove his entangled position. The invincible realm at the age of 22. Such a result was enough to give everyone confidence. Moreover, I have the utmost confidence. Deity was silent. Just like what Daybreak had said. Heavenly South seemed to be in control, but in reality, it was already on the verge of losing control. The Dark Azura Hall of Breaking Dawn was now stationed in Tiannan and was the main combat force of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital in Tiannan. But most of the members of Sinluo Hall were the elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations, who stayed in East Island in the final battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, pretending to be dead. They were Ning Ziyuan's men. In addition to the Sinluo Hall, the leaders of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital that had invested in Tiannan also had other origins. What was the Purgatory of Heaven Capital? It was a superforce in the dark world created by deity. It was a behemoth that was constantly developing in East Island with the support of the East Island royal family. But in the end, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital was the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. 3 years ago, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital appeared in Heaven Capital. 3 years ago, the border war of Jianghu State broke out. 3 years ago, the Li family, with the last afterglow, confronted the 5 major forces of the dark world that invaded the border of Jianghu State. In that fierce battle, There were not many people left in the Li family, and some people were destined to sleep because of it. However, there were even more people who directly fell into purgatory after so-called death. They fell into the purgatory of heaven capital. After the real death, there was eternal darkness. And after the illusory death, there was real freedom. The purgatory of heaven capital in East Island appeared. The Li family of Jianghu state suffered heavy losses. Behind all these appearances, quietly, a decaying old force was transferring its power to a new super force. The combination of time was flawless. In 3 years, or even more than 20 years, the veterans who fell into purgatory from the Li family became the backbone of the purgatory of heaven capital. To some extent, deity could not represent the purgatory of heaven capital. Deity represented only deity. Deity and these veterans were the most complete purgatory of heaven capital. This was the purgatory of heaven capital, and also the Li family after Nirvana rebirth. The layout of Tiannan was the first step for the purgatory of heaven capital to return to Jianghu state. If deity wanted to regain Jianghu state, he was bound to face countless conspiracies. Tiannan was the most suitable entry point. So when Qin Weibai suggested that he march to Tiannan, he did not hesitate. And in order to gain a foothold in Tiannan, all the people he sent were the backbone who were most familiar with Tiannan. Who was most familiar with Tiannan? Naturally, it was the people who had stayed the longest in the camp on the border near Tiannan and were familiar with Tiannan. The people who received the order were in high spirits. Deity did not doubt the loyalty of these people. He could be sure that these people would listen to him completely. But the problem was that these people would listen to his orders, but they would also listen to Li Tianlan's orders. Li Tianlan grew too fast. Now he had the combat capability of the invincible realm. In this way, the entire Tiannan became a tailor-made base for Li Tianlan. Ning Ziyuan, who cherished the Li family, was transferred to be the commander of the Tiannan Freedom Corps. Di Jiang, the biggest resistance of the purgatory of heaven capital, had returned to the Wang family of Beihai. If there were no accidents, he would become the youngest marshal in Jianghu state in the near future and serve as the new commander of the Border Control Corps. But the Blood Battalion was still controlled by Dongqing Wudi. The new commander of the Blood Battalion, Thunder God, was a well-deserved core figure of the Dongqing clan. The Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters was occupied by Mount Shu. The Spirit Tortoise Group, the most elite terracotta army of Jianghu state, had been transferred to Tiannan. What would happen when Li Tianlan arrived in Tiannan? He would become the banker in the entire Tiannan. Everything around him. Whether it was Jianghu state or the purgatory of heaven capital. To some extent it was his power. A 22-year-old young man, his current strength and future potential were worthy of absolute trust. He would occupy Tiannan as quickly as possible and let the Li family shine again there. But the purgatory of heaven capital could not do anything. Deity. Li Tianlan. Everyone in the purgatory of heaven capital took it for granted that these two people could never have any contradictions or differences. Once deity made a move, the entire purgatory of heaven capital would be confused. Deity could not afford such consequences. Because he had his responsibilities. I will let go. The rain was heavier. In the roaring rain, deity's voice was a little vague. But I will not lower my head. At this moment, he thought of the old man of the Li family and Qin Weibai. The old master had prepared for today's game for more than 20 years. But the most critical border battle was caused by the Samsara Palace intentionally or unintentionally. How long had Qin Weibai prepared for today's situation? You won't lower your head? Daybreak asked softly. His voice was a little vague and complicated. Is there still a chance? He whispered. Huawu is dead. There is a chance. Deity's tone was flat. Don't forget that I still have cooperation with Qin Weibai. He paused and said calmly, Do you know why I sent people to Mount Dibbing to attack summer solstice? His tone was somewhat meaningful. Daybreak thought about it, and his face suddenly changed. I know summer solstice's strength very well. Deity's tone was calm. I also know her state. The reason why I sent our own people to die is that the leaders that time were the four most powerful supermasters of the Samsara Palace. If I'm not wrong, it will be difficult for the four of them to participate in anything in Snow Country. So, Daybreak's tone was a little dry. The Samsara Palace is weak and is doomed to perish this time. As soon as the master of Samsara Palace and Qin Weibai die, I will take my time to play with Li Tianlan. He looked at daybreak and whispered, "The final battle in Snow Country will be very lively this time. Maybe in the end, a few half-step invincible realm experts will be enough to decide the whole battle. I plan to take you and Dawn to Snow Country." Daybreak, can I trust you? Phoenix won't go. Daybreak was stunned. No. There was a flash of tenderness in Deity's eyes. Daybreak opened his mouth. "I will go with you." His voice was a little dry, and his eyes were a little dazed. "I was only 16 years old when I followed you. You used to be a marshal in others' hearts. Now you are His Highness in others' hearts. But in my heart, you are the big brother before and after the treason. The most respectable brother." He stared into Deity's eyes. "You can trust me. But I need a reason. Why did I become like this? In my opinion, there is nothing wrong with Tianlan. Why don't you agree with him?" His tone was very serious. He stared into Deity's eyes, fierce and serious, without flinching. Perhaps his eyes were too sharp. So Deity turned his head and looked at Heaven Capital, which was in the midst of wind and rain. "Because he doesn't deserve it," Deity whispered. When he said this, his eyes were extremely stubborn. Chapter 366. Crossing the sea and the glacier, in the depths of the beautiful yet extremely cold polar region, two black-clothed men silently moved forward in the world of ice and snow. It was summer in the northern hemisphere, but the deepest part of the polar region was still full of ice. Glaciers lingered on the frozen seawater. The sun shone on the glaciers, shining with a dreamy luster. Everything in sight was white, transparent, and holy. The two men in black walked in a clean and pure world. Looking from a distance, they were like the two most striking black spots. They climbed over one glacier after another as if they were walking on flat ground. Summer in the Arctic was the polar day. Standing on the pole, front, back, left, right, east, west, north, south, they were all south. The moment the scorching sun set in the south, before the darkness fell, the sun rose again. There was no night in the polar day, only day. Time seemed to have lost its meaning. The two men in black walked all the way in the polar region in silence. The two black-clothed people were a man and a woman. The woman walking in front had a tall and voluptuous figure. Her entire body was wrapped in a black cloak, and from her back, she could be said to be mighty and strong. The man following behind her was thin and even a little thin. The wide cloak was draped over his body, making him look empty, but vaguely giving off a sense of elegance. He silently followed the tall woman in front of him, silent like a shadow. The rising summer sun shone in the depths of the polar region. The sun dyed every corner of the polar region golden. A man and a woman climbed the glacier in front and stood at the top. The deepest part of the entire base suddenly appeared in front of them. This was the coldest place in the core of the entire polar region. The wind and snow whistled under the sun, with biting cold and sharp ice chips. A mountain appeared in front of the men in black. A mountain completely condensed from ice. It was not realistic to say that it was a glacier. In front of the two, it was simply an endless mountain range. The mountain range was tall and magnificent, boundless. The holy white and the sky seemed to be connected, which was a kind of breathtaking magnificence and magnificence. Behind the glacier was the core of the polar region and the endless deep sea, which was beyond human reach. "It's here." After a long silence, the tall and plump woman took the initiative to break the silence and whispered, "Barental Glacier." Barental. It was the ancient language of a small ethnic group in the northernmost part of the snow country. It meant the end of the world. The man behind the woman took off the cloak that made him uncomfortable. He took a deep breath. Under the sun, it was a handsome face that very few people in the dark world knew, but it was indeed standing at the peak of the dark world's martial power. "Nice scenery." Lin Fengting looked around and chuckled. Maybe I should go to the South Pole after this. He had been to too many places over the years. They were beautiful, but there were very few places that were purer than the polar region. "I like it here. There's no taste of the mortal world. It's like heaven, but also like hell." "You like it?" The tall woman turned around and looked at Lin Fengting. The hood of the cloak was very big, and it perfectly covered her entire face. Her eyes were hidden in the darkness, and her gaze was a little blurry. Lin Fengting had already cooperated with Samsara Palace. But in the entire Samsara Palace, there was only one person who could pull Lin Fengting from Mormons to the deepest part of the polar region. It could only be the most mysterious master of Samsara Palace. Palace Lord doesn't like it? Lin Fengting laughed and looked at the Barental Glacier in front of him, which was connected to heaven and earth. From another angle, he could also see the endless deep sea behind the glacier. The glacier was white. The sea behind the glacier was blue and a little black, with a kind of majestic pressure that made people desperate. It was black and white. It was like heaven but also like hell. Since you like it, how about I give the glacier to you? The master of Samsara Palace said. Everyone in Samsara Palace called Lin Fengting Mr., but others called him Mr. out of respect and politeness. But when the master of Samsara Palace said it, there was no emotional fluctuation at all. What's the use of giving it to me? Lin Fengting said with a smile. Just take a look. Can I live in it? Living in it may not be worse than living in the headquarters of the Lin clan. The master of Samsara Palace pointed at the glacier in front of her and said calmly, "This is what I'm looking for." Lin Fengting was stunned, looking at the magnificent glacier in front of him that seemed to occupy the entire polar region. The master of Samsara Palace asked him out just to say that she wanted to find something. Lin Fengting didn't ask what it was. With his strength, he didn't have to worry about anyone plotting against him. Until now, Lin Fengting didn't know that the master of Samsara Palace was looking for this glacier. Here. Lin Fengting was a little hesitant. Now in the whole dark world, perhaps he was the only one who knew the identity of the master of Samsara Palace. Lin Fengting had seen this mysterious master more than once in Lin N. He knew her past and could foresee her future. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made the decision to let her control the Lin clan for the next 20 years. However, this woman's thinking was too imaginative. She had such a great advantage in some aspects that it was difficult for smart people to thoroughly understand her plan. This is the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance. The master of Samsara Palace said in a calm tone that could be said to be earth-shattering news. The real headquarters. It's inside the Barental Glacier. Lin Fengting's body shook instinctively. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the master of Samsara Palace. The headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance? In the Dark World, it was not difficult to find the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance at all, because they were different from the Samsara Palace. This was an alliance. It was an alliance with Snow Country as the core, and its tentacles extended to more than a dozen countries in Eastern Europe. Its sphere of influence was super large but relatively loose. The headquarters of such a force could be said to be the most conspicuous place. In everyone's intelligence, the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance should be in the polar circle not far from Mormons, on a glacier. It was not in the core of the polar region, but inside the largest glacier in the polar region. The distance between the two headquarters was at least thousands of kilometers. So, like the Samsara Palace, the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance in Mormons is fake? Lin Fengting was shocked and immediately returned to normal. After all, he was just an ally of the Samsara Palace. The Lin clan didn't enter the secular world. No matter how mysterious the Polar Ground Alliance was, it had nothing to do with him. That's also true. Because it is indeed the place where the Polar Ground Alliance handles daily affairs, but the headquarters here is more hidden. Only a few core figures of the Polar Ground Alliance are qualified to enter here. And some small-scale but sophisticated laboratories inside the Polar Ground Alliance are also here. The master of Samsara Palace explained meticulously. Lin Fengting suddenly smiled. You knew this place before, didn't you? Just some rough clues, very vague. This was not a place I paid attention to before. The master of Samsara Palace's tone was calm. Some vague clues can be found in the most hidden headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance in a few days? Lin Fengting obviously didn't believe it. It's 3 years. The master of Samsara Palace turned to look at Lin Fengting. From 3 years ago, the people of the Samsara Palace were looking for it with those vague clues, until a few days ago. Lin Fengting looked at the glacier in front of him. There was nothing strange about the glacier, cold and holy. But inside the glacier was the headquarters of the superpower in Eastern Europe, or even the entire Dark World, which had the most complicated structure, or it could be said to be bloated. Lin Fengting felt it incredible. It might not be difficult to open up the glacier, but organizations with a long history like the Polar Ground Alliance had deep foundations, which were completely different from the newly rising Samsara Palace. Why did they need to build such a hidden headquarters here? The Samsara Palace needed to be hidden. In the final analysis, it was because they were not strong enough and their foundations were poor. The Lin clan was unknown because they were hiding from the world, and only their headquarters were hiding from the world. The branches of the Lin clan scattered all over the world were quite confident in their own territory. Just like the Wang family of Beihai. Their headquarters was in Beihai province, on Mount Dibing. But for hundreds of years, who dared to provoke them? Most of the people with such courage were dead. That was the strength and confidence. The Polar Ground Alliance should have such confidence. But why did they build their headquarters here? If it was not because of the lack of confidence, it could only mean that there was a great secret here. Lin Fengting sat down on the glacier. The howling snow and ice chips in the sky suddenly stopped for a moment as he sat down. The world was quiet. Do you need me to take action today? Lin Fengting asked. Mormons was at least 1,000 kilometers away from here. It was the place of the final battle, but the master of Samsara Palace appeared here. No matter what her purpose was, she couldn't be here for sightseeing. Yes. The master of Samsara Palace nodded. To what extent? To kill tyrant? Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. The Polar Ground Alliance. Tyrant. He ranked 8th on the new divine list, holding the murderous weapon of Snow Country, Mountain Shatterer. Both he and the murderous weapon were absolute power-type masters. When he attacked, he even had the courage to tear mountains and fill the ocean. The master of Samsara Palace ranked 4th on the divine list. But according to Lin Fengting's understanding of the master of Samsara Palace, if Tyrant held Mountain Shatterer, when Blue Sky Underworld was not around, the master of Samsara Palace could hardly be Tyrant's opponent under normal conditions. Even if she could win, she would inevitably be seriously injured. On the premise that Mountain Shatterer runs out of energy, seriously injure Tyrant. The master of Samsara Palace whispered, "A living tyrant is more in the interest of the Samsara Palace." Is there any interest in the Samsara Palace? Lin Fengting looked at the master of Samsara Palace with a meaningful look in his eyes. The dark world was in chaos, but the situation was getting clearer and clearer. Northern Europe, Tiannan, North America, and South America were battlefields everywhere. The forces of the Samsara Palace were operating in various battlefields, so they suffered heavy losses. Before the final battle began, the Samsara Palace was already crippled. Now the flames of war were about to burn in Eastern Europe led by the Samsara Palace. Even the most optimistic people found it hard to believe that the Samsara Palace had any way out. Destruction seemed to be the only ending. Destruction was imminent. What was the use of the so-called interests? Of course. The master of Samsara Palace's tone was certain and firm. Only then did Lin Fengting remember that the real headquarters of the Samsara Palace was in Jianghu State. The real headquarters of the Samsara Palace is in Jianghu State. You are in Snow Country, so the real headquarters will definitely be handed over to someone worthy of your trust. I think I understand why military counselor and saint didn't come to Snow Country. The real headquarters of the Samsara Palace is controlled by military counselor and saint, right? The master of Samsara Palace was silent. The code name military counselor, as the name suggests, I can probably understand his position in the Samsara Palace. Saint, this title is interesting. Is he your disciple? Lin Fengting's smile was a little strange and playful, as if he had thought of something interesting. He doesn't recognize my martial arts. The master of Samsara Palace said blandly, and I have nothing to teach him. But there is a piece of information left by a real chosen one in the Samsara Palace. If there is no accident, that information is enough for him to step into the invincible realm at the last moment. Saint can also be regarded as a disciple of the Chosen One. The Chosen One. A touch of regret flashed in Lin Fengting's eyes. He knew who the Chosen One in the Master of Samsara Palace was. How do you explain that information to Saint? Lin Fengting asked in a complicated tone. The Master of Samsara Palace did not speak. Lin Fengting seemed to understand something. He nodded and said to himself, "It turns out that Saint also knows your identity." So, it sounds like a deal between the Samsara Palace and the saints? Silence responded to him. Then such a person is not worthy of your complete trust. So, everything in the Samsara Palace is in the hands of military counselor? Why do you trust military counselor? Lin Fengting seemed to be a chatterbox and kept talking. Because he is a smart person. The master of Samsara Palace answered in a simple tone, as if she did not want to talk more. Lin Fengting thought for a while and nodded in agreement. He is indeed smart. The master of Samsara Palace took out an ancient pocket watch and looked at it. The pocket watch had a complicated dial, showing the time and date. The night of July 26th. It was already the morning of July 26th in Jianghu State. The master of Samsara Palace raised her head and looked at the scorching sun hanging high in the polar day. Today, you only need to help me block Mountain Shatterer. The master of Samsara Palace said softly. Among the 12 murderous weapons, Mountain Shatterer was extremely powerful. Without Mountain Shatterer, Tyrant's strength would be reduced. The master of Samsara Palace alone was enough. Tell me your plan. Lin Fengting said calmly. The whole plan. The whole plan is the Polar Ground Alliance. The master of Samsara Palace said clearly. This is the battlefield I chose a long time ago. After today, there will be new opportunities in the dark world. The master of Samsara Palace looked at the glacier in front of her and asked, What is the Polar Ground Alliance? Before Lin Fengting answered, she had already said to herself, the so-called Polar Ground Alliance, the alliance is the most important. It is a superforce supported by Snow Country and more than a dozen surrounding countries. The oligarchs of Snow Country, the wealthy families of the surrounding countries, and some dark forces in Eastern Europe form an interest group. The final battle in Heaven Capital 3 years ago was just a rehearsal. It can be regarded as the first half of the plan, and the second half is in Snow Country. Lin Fengting listened quietly. Everyone has ambition. The stronger the strength, the greater the power, and the higher the status, the more uncontrollable the ambition. It can be said that the Polar Ground Alliance controls the power of Snow Country and more than a dozen surrounding countries in some aspects. But is it really so? The Polar Ground Alliance was established by the Eastern European countries. It is better to say that the Polar Ground Alliance is constrained by the Eastern European countries. If you are a tyrant, you have the seemingly largest superforce in the dark world, but you have to face the constraints from Snow Country and other countries all day long. Are you willing to do that? What is a tyrant like that? Puppet. Lin Fengting blurted out subconsciously. That's why the Polar Ground Alliance had internal strife a few years ago. Because the Polar Ground Alliance also wanted to change, or Tyrant himself wanted to change. He set up the headquarters here and brought his most trusted subordinates here. He wanted to develop slowly and finally get rid of the shackles of various countries to become the only real tyrant in the dark world of Eastern Europe. The master of Samsara Palace seemed to smile, but her smile was a little cold. What the Samsara Palace did was to cooperate with Tyrant. But we moved a little fast. After seizing the opportunity, we accelerated Tyrant's plan by 10 times or even dozens of times. It was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Lin Fengting just figured out a little meaning, and the master of Samsara Palace had made a clear conclusion. Tyrant's secret action was tantamount to challenging the bottom line of the Eastern European countries. The Samsara Palace secretly promoted and accelerated this process. The Samsara Palace might fail, but Tyrant would definitely fail. As long as Tyrant was seriously injured today and the headquarters here was exposed, the Polar Ground Alliance would not only have internal strife, but completely fall apart. The Eastern European countries waiting for the opportunity will use all means to deal with Tyrant. The powerful families of the Polar Ground Alliance will also fight for power and profit internally. The Polar Ground Alliance without Tyrant is still the Polar Ground Alliance. This is a great benefit that no one, including Snow Country, can ignore. Therefore, the Dark World will have a decisive battle in Eastern Europe, and the countries in Eastern Europe will also fight openly and secretly for the Polar Ground Alliance. If different countries want to rebuild the Polar Ground Alliance and get the real leadership, they will inevitably contact other superpowers. The master of Samsara Palace paused and suddenly laughed. Ha! Lin Fengting only felt his scalp tingle. He stared at the master of Samsara Palace as if he were looking at a madman. He suddenly wondered if his decision was right. It was the madman in front of him who took advantage of the opportunity of Tyrant seeking change, and directly decided the place of the final battle for the Dark World that had been in war for 3 years. The most important thing was that even the war in the Dark World, it was also provoked by the Samsara Palace. What would such a final battle look like? All the countries in Eastern Europe would intervene secretly. More than a dozen countries would fight openly and secretly, and even kill each other secretly. Several superpowers in the dark world had their own positions. The superpowers would form alliances, and the countries would form alliances. But the so-called allies could betray them at any time. This was a huge benefit that could drive anyone crazy. The Eastern European countries would go crazy. All the superpowers in the dark world would go crazy. Tyrant would also go crazy. All the ambitious invincible realm experts would also go crazy. All of them. This would be an extremely chaotic era and an extremely crazy final battle. Compared with the final battle in Heaven Capital 3 years ago, this was the real general trend of the dark world. Lin Fengting didn't know what such madness meant. Did it mean a new era after the end of an era? Or? He stared at the master of Samsara Palace. Not even for a moment. What are you looking at? The master of Samsara Palace's expression was hidden in the cloak, but her voice was a little colder. I really don't like you now. Lin Fengting laughed. The master of Samsara Palace didn't speak, but her aura gradually became cold. Her eyes were fixed on the glacier ahead. Be careful. Although Lin Fengting didn't like the master of Samsara Palace, he still reminded her. The master of Samsara Palace didn't speak. Her body completely straightened in an instant. The ice and snow roared past. The black cloak on her flew up and made a loud noise. Lin Fengting sat where he was, motionless, as if he was extremely quiet. The master of Samsara Palace took a step forward. The whole space was suddenly torn apart. Her figure moved very fast. Under the bright summer sun, she turned into a black line. In just an instant, she appeared above the Barental Glacier. The glacier was silent. The master of Samsara Palace opened her hands, as if she was embracing the whole world. An ethereal but extremely condensed sword intent condensed the moment she opened her hands. The sword energy rushed up to the sky. The vague and sharp sword energy traversed the whole sky and covered the glacier. The wind and snow on the ground were rolling wildly. The ultimate sword intent was rising. Finally it fell. In the depths of the polar region, the Barental Glacier, known as the end of the world, shook. Cracks spread on the glacier one after another. Huge waves rose in the sea behind the glacier. The earth shook and the mountains shook. The sword light spread to the extreme. The cloak on the master of Samsara Palace bloomed completely. Her body lit up. Boundless sword light was released around her in the most thorough manner, and the surging sword chi rained down in a frenzy. On the Barental Glacier, a piece of solid ice with a radius of thousands of meters suddenly exploded in a loud sound. A roar full of anger and majesty suddenly sounded inside the glacier. Then a louder roar sounded. It was a clear and strange gunshot. A ball of misty light lit up the glacier surrounded by sword light again. The light was dim, misty and illusory. With a subtle yellow color, it kept spreading in the sword intent of the glacier. Wherever the yellow light passed, all the glaciers and countless sword intents collapsed. The murderous weapon Mountain Shatterer. Mountain Shatterer with one shot. It was the late night of July 26th in the polar region. In the polar region, the scorching sun hung high in the night. Before the night passed, a piece of explosive news swept through the entire dark world like a hurricane. In the depths of the polar region, the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance in the Barental Glacier was completely exposed. The master of Samsara Palace entered the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance alone. The murderous weapon Mountain Shatterer opened fire. Tyrant, the leader of the Polar Ground Alliance, was seriously injured. The master of Samsara Palace was seriously injured. None of the intelligence mentioned Lin Fengting. And almost at the same time, inside the Polar Ground Alliance, many powerful families announced their withdrawal from the alliance at the same time. Snow Country also officially issued a statement that Tyrant of the Polar Ground Alliance was a traitor of Snow Country. Eastern European countries. They were obliged to help Snow Country kill Tyrant. Different news and different lives swept through the dark world. Everyone understood what the news meant. It meant that the Polar Ground Alliance, the superpower with the largest sphere of influence, the largest number of people, and the most bloated organization in the dark world, finally collapsed completely in just a few hours after several years of preparation. It also meant that the countries in Eastern Europe, including Snow Country, which had the largest territory in the world, had no dark power that could be used. Tyrant was seriously injured. The master of Samsara Palace was seriously injured. The Murderous Weapon Mountain Shatterer. The Murderous Weapon Blue Sky Underworld. The Polar Ground Alliance. The Samsara Palace. All the interests were in Eastern Europe at this time. Overnight, it seemed that everyone had a reason to go to Eastern Europe. Chapter 367. It was stormy in Snow Country. The intersection of the Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Ocean was calm. The world was bustling. The sky was the most beautiful, and the ocean was the quietest. Looking at the world from the deep sea 500 meters below, the world was like a picture that was frozen yet slowly flowing. It was colorful and breathtakingly beautiful. Wang Tianzong had stayed in this underwater world for 3 days. He rarely appreciated the scenery in the deep sea. Most of the time, he was silent or meditating, silently adjusting his state. Under his feet was a deep-sea submarine that cruised in the Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Ocean all year round. Almost all of them were new models independently developed by Beihai Province. The whole submarine showed the standard extreme style of the Wang family of Beihai. The submarine was small in size, and its combat capability was completely negligible. At the beginning of the design of the submarine codenamed Cloud, the designer did not intend for it to have any combat capability. Most of the places that could be equipped with weapons were modified into large and small engine cabins. For stronger stealth performance, Cloud even sacrificed a lot of armor thickness. There were only 6 such military submarines in the entire Wang family of Beihai, and they formed 3 squads. It was not because it was so high-end that the Wang family of Beihai could not afford it, but because it could not find a buyer at all. Such a submarine was completely abnormal. In terms of speed and stealth performance, Cloud was completely at the world's first-class level, but its combat capability and defense capability were also at the bottom of the world's first-class level. No country needed such a military submarine. Its only function was to search for resources in the deep sea more quickly and comprehensively. This was also the only use of the Wang family of Beihai to develop it. And now, Cloud, which was not well received even within the Wang family of Beihai, ushered in the most glorious moment since its service. Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong of Jianghu State had been quietly waiting inside Cloud for 3 days. It was already late at night on July 29th. There were less than 48 hours before the maneuver of the 2 academies of Jianghu State officially began. It was the 3rd day after Wang Tianzong appeared on the edge of the headquarters of Samsara Palace. The sea was calm. The deep sea was calm. Cloud was quietly suspended in the deep sea, motionless. Wang Tianzong, who spent most of his time meditating, opened his eyes from a somewhat narrow room, slowly came to the submarine cabin, and looked out of the window at the deep sea. The deep sea was not dark even at night. Less than 10 kilometers away, the light from the headquarters of Samsara Palace shone on the sea. The dazzling light pierced directly into the sea. The sea within a radius of tens of kilometers was brightly lit under the strong light. The brilliance was simply dazzling. Wang Tianzong silently looked at the light that reached hundreds of meters into the deep sea. He looked calm and thoughtful. "Your Majesty." Xianming appeared behind Wang Tianzong, wanting to say something. Wang family of Beihai? As the head of all the intelligence agencies of the Wang family of Beihai, Xianming could be said to be Wang Tianzong's most trusted confidant. This position was not very dazzling, but it was extremely sensitive. There was almost no other family in the dark world like the Wang family of Beihai, which had gone through hundreds of years of trials and tribulations and had always maintained a rising momentum. The intelligence system of the Wang family of Beihai was even more huge and complicated. Sitting in this position, Xianming was like a pair of eyes hidden in the dark of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang family Shui Ocean. Mingyan Wang. His Majesty asked very general questions, so he was not sure what he was asking about. Xianming thought about it and said slowly, "Snow Country is very lively. Or it can't be more lively." Within 3 days, Fantasy World, Knights Templars, the Jiang family of South America, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, the Heroes Club, the Shadow Throne of the European Union, the Dark Knights, the Men in Black of Star State, and almost all the forces appeared in Eastern Europe. At present, the Bays family in Eastern Europe has officially announced that Knights Templars is their ally. As time goes by, there will be more and more similar things. The Bays family in Eastern Europe. Before the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, the Bays family could be said to be one of the core components of the alliance. Its status was supreme in a small country in Eastern Europe. The collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance caused drastic changes in Eastern Europe. The wealthy families in the alliance, which had never been a monolithic one, were even more fragmented. The Bey's family cooperated with Knights Templars, and other wealthy families would definitely choose to cooperate with other forces. Such cooperation seemed to enhance his own strength, but even Wang Tianzong could not predict what the final result would be. The situation was too chaotic. Even the Sword Emperor had to be careful in the chaos. If he was a little careless, the so-called Sword Emperor would be easily crushed by the general trend. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath and suddenly asked, "What's the attitude of Snow Country?" Silence. Xian Ming's tone was concise. Except for declaring the tyrant a traitor, Snow Country has been silent. How about Beihai Province? Wang Tianzong continued to ask. It's fine for the time being. Xian Ming answered without hesitation. Even though he was deep in the sea, in the past few days, he had never stopped contacting the outside world. His phone had been ringing 24 hours a day. The great changes in the dark world were just the beginning. Wang Tianzong's cautiousness and seriousness were transferred to him, which meant endless pressure and urgency. It's fine for the time being, Wang Tianzong whispered to himself and sneered. It didn't seem a bad thing to be safe for the time being. But it was not a good thing. The geographical location of Beihai Province was extremely special, and the Wang family of Beihai was even more powerful. Although they were in Asia, they could be said to be close to Eastern Europe. When the upheaval in Eastern Europe and the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, other superpowers in the Dark World might not have the energy to take care of the Wang family of Beihai, but none of the wealthy families of the Polar Ground Alliance came to the Wang family of Beihai to ask for cooperation. This kind of unscathed was enough to explain some problems. Any news from Tyrant? Wang Tianzong asked. There's no news for the time being. Tyrant was seriously injured by the master of Samsara Palace that day, and we still have no clues. Xian Ming shook his head. Fine, Tyrant. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and said calmly, after you get the news about him, you go to see him in person and tell him that the Wang family of Beihai can heal his injury and even help him borrow a murderous weapon. As long as he is willing to come to Beihai Province to heal his injury, I can give him a chance to make a comeback. Xian Ming lifted his head with a surprised face. It was not surprising that Wang Tianzong drew Tyrant to his side. He was surprised that Wang Tianzong was willing to borrow a murderous weapon for Tyrant. The 12 murderous weapons in the Dark World could be said to be the only power that could be compared with the invincible realm in hundreds of years. The first murderous weapon, Human Emperor, opened fire on the border 3 years ago after more than a decade of silence. When Night Spirit was destroyed, Blue Sky Underworld sprayed sparks. In the final battle of Heaven Capital, the legend of Qin and the Shadow the Ripper had confronted each other. More than a year ago, the Dark Saint Judgment shook Northern Europe. Half a month ago, Setting Sun seriously injured Gu Xingyun. 3 days ago, after the sound of Mountain Shatterer, the Polar Ground Alliance completely collapsed. Thinking of this, Xian Ming was shocked. Only then did he realize that in just 3 years, more than half of the 12 murderous weapons in the Dark World had been in the state of energy storage at this time. There were still 5 murderous weapons that could be used. Which one did Wang Tianzong want to borrow? Almost without thinking, Xian Ming already had the answer in his mind. If the Immortality Potion, the Devil Troop, and the Heaven Punishment Troop belonged to the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, then the murderous weapon that Wang Tianzong wanted to borrow this time was the friendship that the Wang family of Beihai had given to the outside world. It was recognized in the Dark World as a murderous weapon second only to the Human Emperor. Its power was not as good as the Human Emperor, but it was the fastest murderous weapon among the 12 murderous weapons. That was recognized as the fastest speed. Wang Tianzong drew Tyrant to his side. Tyrant was an ally. Who did Wang Tianzong want to use the fast murderous weapon in the hands of his ally to deal with? Xian Ming thought of the past of the Wang family of Beihai, and all the peak experts in the Dark World today. He sighed in his heart. To deal with the former friendship with the former friendship? He looked at Wang Tianzong, but only saw absolute calmness on his face. Xian Ming agreed in a low voice and sent a message with his mobile phone. He stood quietly behind Wang Tianzong and did not move. Wang Tianzong glanced at him. Your Majesty, today is the 29th. Xian Ming's voice was gentle. The maneuver of the 2 academies in Jianghu State will start the day after tomorrow. There's still time. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and said slowly, "What are you waiting for?" Xianming couldn't help asking. "Waiting for someone." Wang Tianzong's voice was cold. He suddenly asked, "What do you think the form of the Samsara Palace's existence in the dark world is?" This inexplicable question made Xianming at a loss. He was silent for a long time before he whispered, "What form?" "I don't know." Wang Tianzong shook his head. "But I can be sure that no matter what form they are in, their existence is different from that of the Wang family of Beihai. The Samsara Palace is too mysterious, and we have too little information. I can't determine the form of the Samsara Palace's existence, so I can't determine the value of this so-called headquarters. In this case, I'm willing to waste some time and wait for something more valuable. What do you think an injured person wants to do the most?" Wang Tianzong answered his own question. "Of course it's to heal. And it's to heal in the safest place. Where is safer than the headquarters of the Samsara Palace? It's not far from Snow Country. I think the master of Samsara Palace will come back." Wang Tianzong whispered, "That's my goal." The dazzling light radiated in all directions with the headquarters of the Samsara Palace as the core. In the center of the exquisite and beautiful island, there was an information hall that controlled the security of the entire island. The light shone from the island to the surroundings. Wherever it passed, all the images appeared on the huge screen in the information hall. Not only the impact, but some abnormal signal frequencies would also appear in the hall after being detected by the radar. So in theory, the places around the headquarters of the Samsara Palace that were covered by the light, whether in the sky or in the deep sea, had no targets that could hide. Unless the other party's technology was far beyond the radar of the Samsara Palace. More than a dozen technicians of the Samsara Palace were busy in the hall full of instruments, searching for all the suspicious images and signals. Everything was normal within dozens of kilometers of the headquarters. The images were normal. The signals were normal. A bald middle-aged man quietly stared at a small screen in the big screen. On the screen, in the depths of the sea less than 10 kilometers away from the headquarters, an imperceptible signal flickered. The signal was not suspicious. Because the signal sent by the other party was exactly the same frequency as the signal returned by the radar of the headquarters. The middle-aged man silently looked at the screen in front of him and finally opened a communication window on the screen. The communication was quickly connected. A tall and plump woman in a black cloak appeared on the screen. Her breath was weak and she was silent. "Your Highness, it has been confirmed that the Sword Emperor of Jianghu State, Wang Tianzong, has arrived at the headquarters. Now he is less than 10 kilometers away from us." The middle-aged man looked at the figure on the screen, bowed respectfully, and said softly, "Confirmed." On the screen, the tall woman under the cloak had a hoarse voice. "Yes, I can confirm." The middle-aged man said softly. He looked up at the small screen where the signal was concentrated. On the screen, the signal with the same frequency as the radar of the Samsara Palace flashed again. Nothing unusual. But the fact that there was nothing unusual was the greatest anomaly. The rise of the Samsara Palace was too short. In terms of technological development alone, even 10 Samsara palaces could hardly catch up with the Wang family of Beihai. So under normal circumstances, it was impossible for the Wang family of Beihai to search for the signal of the Cloud submarine. But in fact, the signal sent by Cloud Smoke had been flashing in the information hall of the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. For 3 days, it had not changed its position at all. It was not because of the advanced technology of the Samsara Palace that it could do this. The only explanation was that the radar used by the headquarters of the Samsara Palace was also the latest model developed by the Wang family of Beihai, and it had never been sold to the public. So the feedback of Cloud Smoke and the radar signal was exactly the same. Obviously, Wang Tianzong did not know this. That was why he had been quietly staying in the cloud, waiting for the return of the master of Samsara Palace. The headquarters of the Samsara Palace had already known the location of Wang Tianzong's submarine. But the Samsara Palace did not intend to let Wang Tianzong down. On the communication screen, the woman in a black cloak stood up and said calmly, "I'm on my way." "Welcome." The middle-aged man's voice was a little trembling, with indescribable complexity. He bowed deeply to the screen. "Welcome back, Your Highness." The communication screen was hung up directly. The middle-aged man did not straighten up for a long time. His Highness was indeed returning. However, his return this time clearly had an unusual meaning. In the information hall, the staff stood up one by one and left the hall in turn. "Doctor, aren't you evacuating?" When the last staff member left, he subconsciously asked. "No." The middle-aged and balding doctor smiled. His face was very gentle. "I'm tired. I need to rest." The last staff member hesitated and turned to leave. The doctor turned around and adjusted the huge screen behind him to the maximum. Countless small screens disappeared on the big screen. On the whole screen, the whole scene of the headquarters of the Samsara Palace was clearly reflected. The palaces were continuous, and the birds were singing in a variety of patterns. The night was beautiful. A helicopter flew through the night sky and landed on the ground with the roar of the rotors. The hatch door opened, and a figure wrapped in a black cloak slowly walked down. She was tall and plump, but it seemed that because of the serious injury, her body was not straight. "Welcome back." The doctor looked at the man in black on the screen and muttered to himself, "Welcome to death." Returning was also a death. Chapter 368. Cloud was keenly aware of the signal that landed on the headquarters of Samsara Palace from a high altitude. The signal was a small red dot. This was the color of the signal that did not belong to them. It appeared on the screen of Cloud and kept flashing. Finally, it completely merged with the dense signals of the headquarters of Samsara Palace and became completely still. Xian Ming, who was standing behind Wang Tianzong, was a little excited. He also had a complicated and nervous feeling of being involved in the general trend. He didn't expect that His Majesty had waited here for 3 days, and he really found his prey. Was it the master of Samsara Palace? If it was really the master of Samsara Palace who returned to the headquarters, what did it mean? In a few days after the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, the Samsara Palace was completely destroyed? From the fall of Night Spirit 3 years ago, to the final battle of Heaven Capital, to the 3-year war in the Dark World, the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, and the competition in Eastern Europe, if the Samsara Palace was destroyed today, how chaotic would the Dark World be? He subconsciously glanced at Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong's expression was calm and indifferent. He didn't know if the latest signal was the master of Samsara Palace. But he could see it. "Take a look," Wang Tianzong said. Xian Ming picked up the walkie-talkie in the submarine and gave an order. The technicians of the Wang family of Beihai, who had been busy for several days and only needed the last step, broke through the network of the headquarters of Samsara Palace almost immediately. The firewall of the headquarters of Samsara Palace reacted violently. Alarms and warning signals appeared on every computer in the headquarters. The whole process took less than 3 seconds, and then the screen in front of Wang Tianzong suddenly turned dark. The headquarters of Samsara Palace had completely cut off the network. The process was very short. But Wang Tianzong had seen what he wanted to see. A helicopter was parked in the middle of the island of the headquarters of Samsara Palace. Beside the helicopter, a woman with a weak aura stood there, wrapped in a cloak. The island was full of bright lights that could dispel the night. Her figure stood in the light, a little blurred and dazzling. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. All the calmness and indifference completely disappeared from him. He stood quietly, but his whole person showed a completely indescribable sharpness. The grievances with the Li family many years ago, the friendship with the Lin clan, the loss after attacking Li Honghe, the anger after summer solstice was seriously injured by the sneak attack, and the threat brought to him by Li Tianlan, who was as amazing as the Chosen One. Everything was accumulated in the depths of his heart. After 3 days of meditation, his sword intent had reached its true peak. Wang Tianzong slowly turned around. "Your Majesty, be careful." Xian Ming took a deep breath and said cautiously, "Even now, we can't rule out that the headquarters of Samsara Palace is a trap." Wang Tianzong smiled and said nothing. He was the Sword Emperor of Jianghu State. With a sword in hand, there were no traps or conspiracies in the world. There was no day and night in the headquarters of Samsara Palace. The light seemed to surround this exquisite island forever. The sunlight faded. Light appeared. The dazzling light shrouded every corner of the island, illuminating everything. There was no day or night here, nor was there a starry sky. There was only light. The light had been alternating on the island for 3 days and nights. Countless light beams slowly rotated on the island. It shone on the sky and penetrated the ocean. The beam of light flowed in the night with a psychedelic trajectory. The helicopter landed at the highest point of the island. The area that could be regarded as a landing pad was not large, but it was extremely flat. The poor woman hidden in the black cloak stood quietly at the highest place of the headquarters of the Samsara Palace, overlooking the entire headquarters. The headquarters of the Samsara Palace was extremely beautiful, but the light was too pale, making everything lose its original color. She stood silently and did not move for a long time. Several figures walked over slowly in the light of the island. They came behind her and bowed in silence. The wind blew on the island. Her black cloak fluttered with the wind, looking a little cold. Under the pale light, she, dressed in black, was like a little black spot that should not have appeared. "How is it?" In the night wind, she suddenly spoke in a stiff tone. "The Devil Troop has withdrawn a week ago. Most of our researchers have also left. Everything is ready." A man with a long sword on his back took a step forward and replied calmly. The man's clothes were as white as snow, which seemed to be completely integrated with the dazzling light. He was extremely handsome and had shoulder-length hair, which was not common among men. The night wind blew his hair, and the long sword on his back trembled slightly. His whole person showed a kind of outstanding handsomeness and wildness. He was a swordsman, one of the 12 supermasters of Samsara Palace. She turned around and glanced at the swordsman. She also glanced at them. The swordsman was surrounded by experts who were famous in the dark world. Azura, the supermaster of the Samsara Palace. Azure Dragon, the supermaster of the Samsara Palace. Doctor, the supermaster of the Samsara Palace. In addition, there were several heavyweights who were not on the list of supermasters but were no less important than the supermasters in the Samsara Palace. "Don't go," she asked. "We are willing to die for your highness." Everyone said in unison. This time they did not bow. Everyone stood straight in front of her with a peaceful expression. Under the cloak, she turned around and looked at the undulating and rotating light column over the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. The light column shook the night with a subtle frequency, blurred and dreamy. Under the cloak, her eyes changed from trance to coldness. She lowered her head and looked at the sea. The sea was sparkling with the light. Her eyes seemed to pass through the sea and fall into the depths of the sea. "There it is." She stretched out her hand and pointed to the sea. Boom! The whole sea suddenly shook. There seemed to be an unimaginably huge force surging and boiling at the bottom of the sea. The huge force, like a mountain in a sea, broke through the sea with incredible violence and strength. The whole island seemed to be trembling slightly. All eyes focused in an instant and stared at the sea, as if they wanted to see through the bottom of the sea. The bottom of the sea was not the bottom. 500 meters below the sea, there was water above and below. The majestic pressure was overwhelming from all directions, as if to completely obliterate all Wang Tianzong's vitality. The environment in the deep sea was quiet and silent. Wang Tianzong stood in the water as if he were stepping on the ground. The whole sea was surging silently. He could feel the crisp sound of his bones under the impact of the sea, and he could feel the sharp pain that his body would be torn and crushed at any time. But his eyes were still calm. Calm without any emotion. There were no ups and downs in the deep sea, but the extremely terrible turbulence went all the way south. Wang Tianzong's feet were like two anchors nailed to the deep sea. He stood steadily, adapting to the pressure that almost suffocated him, motionless. The sword intent stirred the sea with difficulty. A sword domain with a radius of a few meters appeared around Wang Tianzong's body. Wang Tianzong did not move or breathe. The huge tide around him roared past. Gradually adapting to the pressure, Wang Tianzong slowly took a step in the sea. The sea went south. He went north. Going against the water, the overwhelming water pressure seemed to become his power in an instant. His foot fell. The whole sea was boiling in an instant. The deep sea, with Wang Tianzong as the center, instantly turned into white waves all over the deep sea. A large area of the sea was completely twisted in the completely violent sword intent and power. The ever-growing submarine cloud was directly pushed out in the twisted sea. The unimaginable power spread from the bottom of the sea to the surface. The ebbing sea began to fluctuate, and the waves were endless. Wang Tianzong took the second step forward. His movements were extremely slow, but his power and sword intent were getting stronger and stronger. Wang Tianzong held the long sword in his hand tightly. This was the sharpest famous sword of the Wang family of Beihai now. The sword was called Listen to the Sea. Listen to the sea in the deep sea. The third step fell. Wang Tianzong's eyes focused instantly. In the crazy and oppressive sea, he suddenly thought of his life and the glory of the Wang family of Beihai that lasted for hundreds of years. He thought of many people: Summer Solstice, Wang Xianxia, Wang Yuetong, Wang Xiaoyao, Li Honghe, Li Guangtu, Lin Fengting. There were too many people. With a beauty by his side and a strong enemy by his side, he was invincible and powerful. What did he want in his life? The fourth step fell. The sword domain composed of pure sword energy expanded wildly, squeezing the sea. Water was the softest, but it was also the fiercest. The moment the endless sea was squeezed out, it pressed down with a heavier momentum. The sword domain struggled to maintain and was on the verge of collapse. His body seemed to be breaking, and it became difficult to breathe. This feeling was so familiar. In a trance, Wang Tianzong laughed, which was extremely clear. He thought of what he wanted. Everything he had done in his life, including all the crimes, despicable, insidious and shameless, was to protect the honor of the Wang family of Beihai. The honor and foundation that lasted for hundreds of years were so powerful, so vigorous and so heavy. Heavier than the sea. He would not allow anyone to destroy this honor and majesty. Wang Tianzong's palm held the hilt of Listen to the Sea. The fifth step fell. He drew the sword. The bright sword edge went up. His figure was also going up. Wang Tianzong's eyes were condensed and focused. There was no emotion in his eyes, only sword intent. Samsara Palace? More than that. He wanted the whole world to see this sword stroke. So what if the Polar Ground Alliance collapsed? So what if Eastern Europe changed drastically? So what if the Wang family of Beihai had hidden dangers? When he was at his peak, everyone under his sword was like an ant, a piece of grass. The sword edge was unsheathed little by little. His figure rose little by little in the sea. This speed was very slow, but it was extremely heavy. At this moment, the Sword Emperor and his sword seemed to be driving the whole world. The world suddenly fell silent. Above the headquarters of Samsara Palace, the dreamy and blurred light column was still rotating, covering the entire island. The island was shaking. In everyone's horrified eyes, as far as their eyes could see, the sea area of at least 10,000 meters or even more was boiling like crazy in an instant. The vast sea was constantly shaking under the tremendous force, bringing up monstrous waves. The wind in the air completely stopped, and the whole world seemed to become an extremely violent but silent world. The vibration of the island was silent. The rolling of the waves was silent. The supermasters of Samsara opened their mouths and could not make a sound. There was only sword intent in the air. The sword intent rushed out of the deep sea. It fell from the sky. The vast world was full of swords. The sea surface shook more and more violently. The sparkling sea surface gradually changed color, and the flashing light gradually turned pure white. The tremendous force completely stirred the seawater in the area of 10,000 meters. The seawater began to rise silently and overflowed the edge of the island. Everyone could only watch this scene helplessly. In the silence, there was an indescribable sense of powerlessness and despair. Boom! The loud sound, as if the world was broken, suddenly sounded at the moment when the sea surface boiled to the limit. The sky fell and the earth cracked. It was deafening. No one could see Wang Tianzong's figure. There was only the sea in front of everyone. The sea was completely overturned. The sea area of 10,000 meters rose at the same time with the crazy eruption of sword intent. The seawater was rising continuously and hitting the sky. What was the connection between the sky and the sea? This was not the scene at the end of the sight. In the loud roar, the endless seawater on the sea surface was like a mountain suddenly rising from the sea. The mountain was 10,000 meters high, and the sword intent was awe-inspiring, going straight into the sky. It was close at hand, but it was so high that one could not see the edge. Infinite sword intent. Boundless huge waves. The wild waves, like giant pillars supporting the sky, seemed to reach the end of the sky, and then fell down wildly. The sword intent that broke out completely in an instant completely merged with the huge waves. The flying current went down 30,000 feet. Under the sword energy, there was only destruction. This was the full outbreak of the Sword Emperor of Jianghu State. This was the peak sword of the Sword Emperor of Jianghu State. It surpassed the collision between a sword intent and deity when he was in Heaven Capital. It surpassed the 25th blade in the night sky of Lin N. The sword energy was 10,000 meters long, mighty and mighty. 6 paths of reincarnation. One sword to dominate the world. The 10,000-meter-long sword energy fell from the sky, and heaven and earth seemed to be rotating. There was only one sword in the world. In the headquarters of the Samsara Palace, a large number of lights rotated in the trembling. The light illuminated the sky, the mountain-like towering waves, and the sword. This sword was like a mountain, like a sky curtain. The most invincible sword. Boom! Countless beams of light rotated on the island, and a large area of smoke and fire appeared in every corner of the Samsara Palace. All the weapons in the headquarters of the Samsara Palace fired at the same time. In the smoke, the faint blue lightning was faint. All the superiors of the thunder-shocking realm were breaking out all their strength regardless of life and death. The huge waves, the sword energy, the sparks, and the lightning met in the air. In the rolling smoke, the blurred and dreamy beams of light were still rotating. The waves in the deep sea were towering, and the light on the island was disordered. The smoke, light, and sword intent covered everything. The whole island seemed to disappear completely. All the cannon fire and sword intent were completely shattered by the sword chi that fell straight down. The huge waves condensed by the sword intent burst into splashes all over the sky, but the splashes were condensed and did not disperse. They cycled between the falling waves. The sword intent did not dissipate, but became stronger. On the island of the Samsara Palace, hundreds of beams of light suddenly went out and lit up again. The beams of light intertwined. At the moment of uncertainty, a silent but fierce sword light suddenly lit up in a trance. The sword energy and the huge waves fell between heaven and earth, straight up and down. But the sword light that suddenly lit up seemed to cross the sky and the earth. The extremely condensed sword light was like a crescent moon that was more than a kilometer long. The sword intent lingered, and every arc had natural beauty and dominance. The sword light was still falling. In an instant, the huge arc of light over a kilometer broke through the smoke and fire, flew out of the island, and went straight into the sea. The sword light, with indomitable sharpness and determination, hit the huge waves that connected the sky and the earth hard. The huge waves that were as high as 10,000 meters suddenly trembled. Wang Tianzong, standing at the highest place, also trembled. The next moment, the huge arc of light suddenly shattered, and the sword intent diffused and dissipated. Wang Tianzong's 6 paths of reincarnation also weakened. But no matter how weak it was also 6 paths of reincarnation. The huge waves connecting the sky and the earth seemed to have changed, but it also seemed to have not changed. The sea water kept rising into the sky, and then fell down with the incomparably majestic sword intent. Water was the softest, but the water in the sword intent was as cold as ice and as hard as steel. The majestic sword energy fell in the center of the Samsara Palace. The sky and the earth shook together. All the light on the island disappeared in an instant. The sword energy pierced the island from the sky, then the island, and went straight into the deep sea. Cracks appeared on the whole island in the continuous loud noise. The center of the island suddenly burst out a light that reflected the waves and the sword energy. The sword energy penetrated the whole island, and the land on the island was instantly broken. The land and stones kept flying, and it spread to the whole island from the center. The supermaster of the Samsara Palace. The woman in the cloak. It was a magnificent building. Flowers, trees, beaches, weapons. Everything was fluttering in the sword intent. The 10,000-meter-high waves finally fell and hit the wreckage of the island hard. The island shook and sank completely into the deep sea. The boiling seawater flooded the entire headquarters of the Samsara Palace, and there was no trace of its existence. Wang Tianzong's body shook violently in the air. Because of exhaustion, his face was a little pale. But the whole island was completely turned into dust under his sword, and a small amount of wreckage had sunk to the bottom of the sea. Countless corpses floated in the sea and then sank. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath and listened to the sea tightly in his hand. In the distance, the cloud had emerged from the water and rushed in the direction of Wang Tianzong at full speed. Wang Tianzong slowly landed on the submarine and entered the cabin. "Your Majesty!" Xian Ming rushed up at the first time and seemed to want to help Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong's power broke out too thoroughly, and he seemed to be a little weak and pale. But Xianming's eyes were full of irrational worship and fanaticism. I'm fine. Through the submarine, Wang Tianzong looked at the sea that no longer existed in front of him. He listened to the sea in his hand and was silent for a long time. Xianming, who was full of excitement, stood beside him and resisted the desire to speak. He had never seen such a sword move in his life. What was His Majesty thinking at this time when he wielded the sword? Xianming. Wang Tianzong suddenly spoke. Yes. Xianming subconsciously straightened his body. Wang Tianzong looked out of the window, his eyes distant. After a long silence he whispered, "People say that the 4 realms of martial arts are the foundation, and the invincible realm is the limit. What do you think is above the invincible realm?" Xianming's body shook violently, and his heart suddenly felt cold. Wang Tianzong shook his head and whispered, "Go to Huating." The submarine left quietly. There was no light on the sea, and it became dark again. The tall figure wrapped in a black cloak had been dead for a long time. Her body was almost completely broken, and her limbs were missing. The broken body rose and fell in the sea, lifeless. Another submarine gradually emerged on the sea. A diver jumped out of the submarine, swam to the deep sea, picked up the broken body wrapped in the cloak, and dragged it into the submarine. There was a small conference room in the submarine. Qin Weibai and Lin Fengting sat face to face, and flaming fire stood behind Qin Weibai as usual. There were only 3 of them. There was a screen hanging in the conference room. The screen repeatedly played the scene of Wang Tianzong's attack not long ago. The shaking island, the overturned sponge, the huge waves that suddenly connected heaven and earth, and the sword energy that filled the world. Lin Fengting stared at the screen seriously. Apart from graveness, there were no other emotions in his eyes. This sword move. After a long time, Lin Fengting slowly opened his mouth. His voice was a little hoarse. "I can't catch it. You've just tried. It turns out that you really can't catch it," Qin Weibai said calmly. Before the destruction of the headquarters of Samsara Palace, even Wang Tianzong thought that the huge arc of light was the dying counterattack of the master of Samsara Palace. It was her 24 moves of sword. But at the moment when the light and shadow intertwined and blurred, the huge arc of light was actually driven by Lin Fengting's sword. Lin Fengting was a little far from the island, so the sword energy was a little weak. Wang Tianzong just used one sword move, and he could continue to use the sword. There were all kinds of excuses. But in fact, even if Lin Fengting stood on the island, it was difficult to completely break the 6 paths of reincarnation no matter how many swords he used. Lin Fengting was a little depressed and lost in thought. He was lazy and aloof from the world, but it didn't mean that he really had no desire to win. He knew that he was no match for Wang Tianzong, but he never thought that under this sword move, the gap between him and Wang Tianzong would be so huge. Wang Tianzong broke through. Qin Weibai said softly. Her voice was very soft, but the content was earth-shattering. Lin Fengting and Flaming Fire trembled at the same time. Of course, it's just half a step forward from the peak of the invincible realm. But this half a step is already enough to widen the gap that already exists. Qin Weibai's tone was a little complicated. The sword move just now came from the deep sea. Under great pressure, it made Wang Tianzong go further. This is my miscalculation. If I'm right, the current Wang Tianzong is only half a level lower than Dongqing Huangtu in the past. In this era, it's really hard for him to find an opponent. Dongqing Huangtu. Lin Fengting smiled self-deprecatingly. The real chosen one. Obviously, Wang Tianzong is only half a step away from the real chosen one, or even infinitely close. Qin Weibai looked at the screen and said softly, "In fact, it's normal. The Wang family of Beihai has been glorious for too long. The longer it is glorious, the greater the pressure on the air. Now that chaos is coming, it's no surprise that Wang Tianzong broke through under such pressure." Lin Fengting smiled, took a deep breath, and barely stabilized his mind. "What should Tianlan do?" he asked softly. "The final maneuver is about to begin. Who can control Wang Tianzong?" "The Dongqing clan has the power to make Wang Tianzong afraid." Qin Weibai was silent for a long time before she whispered. "Just afraid?" Lin Fengting asked. "If Tianzong has made up his mind, can Tianlan survive?" Qin Weibai was silent. Silence itself was an answer. This is not a foolproof plan, Lin Fengting said. Who could have thought that he would break through today? If there is no breakthrough, the Huating maneuver is foolproof. Qin Weibai's tone was a little bitter. The door of the conference room was pushed open. An elite of Samsara Palace in a diving suit put half of the black body on the conference table, and then left in silence. Qin Weibai looked at the body on the conference table silently. The master of Samsara Palace did not draw her sword in the headquarters. So it was not the master of Samsara Palace under the cloak. But Wang Tianzong would not know this. Qin Weibai reached out and lifted the cloak on the body. The face of Shadowless, one of the 12 supermasters of Samsara Palace, was revealed. She looked at Shadowless's body and took a deep breath. After today, Samsara Palace will turn from bright to dark. All the sacrifices are worth it. Unfortunately, she did not finish her words. But Lin Fengting knew what she was going to say. Wang Tianzong broke through again, and his sword intent reached 10,000 meters. He was almost on par with the Chosen One. If he had been a little closer at that time, even if he did not die today, he would have gained enough surprises. Unfortunately? Lin Fengting shook his head with a bitter smile. Am I going to Huating? No. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.